So this is both sides. It's a new Friday panel. We try to keep it between like 4, max 5 people. That way everyone gets a fair bit of talking time. Try to really pick people who match the topic well, that probably have more knowledge and experience in it, so that there's some level of progress and fruit, ideally, that comes from the conversation. You'll notice that I myself and Prime are here. Prime is my wonderful, wonderful, willing co-mod. So we're going to have 2 moderators in all of these both sides panels, and we're going to kind of occupy different roles. So my job today is I'm going to be monitoring time. One thing that I think is really important for panels to be really successful and fruitful is to have some concision. Typically, when people are more concise, interruptions happen less often, and there's tends to be just better flow in general to the conversation. So I'll just be timing all of you, and at the end, I'll release the total talking time so you can kind of see how long you talk compared to other people, which some people find interesting if you're curious. And then our wonderful Prime is going to be doing kind of the bad faith refereeing. So he's going to kind of help steer the conversation if we get paused at all. If there's any moment, so bad faith is a big ooga booga word in the Twitch debating world, but we're trying to normalize it and acknowledge that everyone is sometimes a little bit bad faith, and that's okay. Just when it happens, we've got a referee to correct it. So if somebody's talking with you and it's pretty obvious that they're never understanding what you're saying, we'll kind of Prime will step in and be like, hey, this is actually what like April's saying. Can you engage with that instead of what you seem to believe that she's saying? I think we just lost Lav. Hopefully we'll get her back. Any questions about those rules?
Sounds reasonable, sounds good, guys.
Awesome. Okay. So for concision, just so you guys know, I give you guys a minute opening statements, give or take. If you go a little bit long, I won't lambast you. And then once we're in open panel, I'll time everyone when you start talking, and I typically give every person about 1.5 minutes, which is actually a fairly long time to talk at one time. If you're going towards the end of the 1.5 minutes, I'll cue you by saying, hey, wrap it up in 2 sentences. So I'll probably say something like 2 sentences. That's your cue to kind of TLDR it, finish up. If you don't finish up, I'll basically go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you're still talking at 1, I'll mute you super quickly. Once the conversation picks back up, I'll immediately unmute you. You won't be muted for like 10 minutes or anything like that. It's just to kind of keep that concision going. Yeah.
I have one request. Can I not go first? Because I need to gauge the level of chaos. If everyone's being chill, I want to match the energy, kind of.
Okay.
If this makes sense.
That does make sense. I feel like, I should almost ask Kelly to bring in the chaos. I'm just kidding.
The pressure is on now.
The pressure's on. So what we'll do start is, while we're waiting for Lav, I'll message her and see what's going on. I'll maybe get you guys just to introduce yourself, shout out your socials, also DM me your socials so I can have them running. That would be great. We'll start maybe with Madam, since you're right on my left.
Hey, hello. I am Genevieve, Madam Genevieve, and I am a sex positive feminist and also a sex worker. I do online sex work and I do in real life sex work as well. Excited to be on this panel, you guys. I think it's going to be a really good dialogue. You've got some interesting questions formed around online sex work in general. And I think there's going to be some good communication around that. I'm fairly new to streaming in Twitch, so you can find my Twitch at Madam Genevieve, and it's just kind of starting to pick up steam recently. Twitter is generally the best website to find what's going on with me. That's Madam_Genevieve. I'll put it in the chat here too. Or in
I know. Yeah, I was gonna say, I know everyone's gonna be confused about where the I's and E's go. So
I know it's a very tricky name. So I'm like, I can tell you right now, but you're probably not gonna know. Let me just go ahead and spell it out.
Yeah, for sure. That's perfect. Prime, could you introduce yourself? Everyone's wondering, like, when did you open your OnlyFans?
I did that for tier 3 subs. It's been out there for a while, right? But yeah, it's thank you all for being here. Everyone who stopped by. My name is PrimeCayes, PrimeCayes. Yeah, I do online panels like this time, or we do deep dives into subjects. We do react sometimes. We do all kinds of things. So come find me on Twitch or YouTube. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. April?
Yeah, I go by Taftaj on the internet or Taf. I do OnlyFans as my main job, and then I like debating with people as a hobby.
Awesome. Nice and simple. Kelly?
Yo, my name is Kelly Jean, which is obvious, but I'm a cosplayer predominantly. I started getting into OnlyFans via Patreon when Patreon became less popular, and OnlyFans was a better platform to use. I don't normally consider myself a sex worker, but I don't mind if other people do, simply on the basis that I'm more sex worker adjacent. I use the same techniques and things that sex workers do, but I'm not going to sit here and imply me selling sexy cosplay pics is similar to like higher levels of sex work. So I have a somewhat understanding of it based on my friends that do a higher level of sex work. But yeah, I just wanted to put that out there to start with. Yeah. What else do I do? I don't know. Meme on the internet. I do stream, but only twice in the last 3 years, so if that counts much.
Awesome. Okay, well, I think Lav's Wi-Fi just crashed, so she'll be back in a little bit. As you guys all know, I'm not so erudite, and this is my channel, so you already know where to find me. Okay, I'm gonna start with the opening question. I'll give you guys each a minute to go, and then when Lav gets back, I'll maybe let her make a quick statement if she gets back kind of in time. Alrighty. Online sex work has been launched in the forefront of the social media conversation due to multiple controversial figures like Andrew Tate. Questions have been lobbied about the impact of sites like OnlyFans on consumers and society, but few ask what impact these sites have on the content creators. For you guys, do you guys think that OnlyFans or other online sex sites are safe for content producers? Is online sex work a safe form of empowerment and financial freedom for the creators? Or does being in sex work turn you off or blackpill you towards your customers? And does sex work change your relationship with your body? So we'll probably focus on the first beginning questions. I actually wanted to save that last question as the kind of its own section within this conversation because I think there's a lot to go into there. But to start off with, if you guys could answer for me, do you guys think that OnlyFans and other online sex sites are safe for content producers? And is online sex work a form of empowerment and financial freedom? We'll start with April.
Okay, yeah, I'll take the position that is extremely boring because it's nuanced and not that fiery. But like, OnlyFans is very mixed, and you can engage with it in a way that is bad, or you can engage with it in a way that's productive. I don't think that it's particularly dangerous for people who produce content on OnlyFans. You have to ask the question, like, dangerous and compared to what? Compared to IRL sex work, it's much less dangerous. Is it more dangerous than just like never going on the internet? I guess so. It's slightly more dangerous. Is it a form of empowerment or financial freedom? It definitely can be. The vast majority of people don't make that much money on OnlyFans. So I think you have to really be kind of cautious or realistic about the outcomes. Does it turn you off or blackpill you towards your customers? I don't think that it should, unless you go in with like very extreme expectations for how they're going to act. Like, the reality is that it's, at the end of the day, it's a transactional experience, and you produce content, they give you money. That's all it needs to be. And when you start introducing all of these parasocial aspects, I think that's when it starts being dangerous, both for, mentally, for both the content creator and for the consumers. That's all.
Awesome. Kelly Jean, can we go to you next?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like it's as safe as it can be. I mean, things can always be improved, right? But like, when we say safe, nothing can truly be safe, and anything on the internet is not truly safe. But there is at least the fact that you are selling your own content at your own rates, at your own will. You don't need to be pimped to have an OnlyFans, and I don't know if I would compare it too much to IRL sex work. I just feel like it's different simply because, well, it's just you're just doing a different service. But I mean, you could compare it to what the porn industry used to be, right? So, like, men with their production companies taking a large profit off of women back in the day. You have the option to not do that now. So, empowering to that point, sure. The less men that are involved in, like, manhandling women that are just trying to make content, the better, usually.
Okay. Madam Genevieve.
Thanks. I definitely agree with a lot of what was already said. I think online sex work is the safest form of sex work that is currently in existence and available. It probably has the lowest level of risk, especially when we compare it to various types of in real life sex work, even other legal types like stripping. Um, I think that, as Kelly Jean mentioned, obviously there's going to be risks to everything. There's always going to be, there's no nothing that could ever be perfectly safe, but being able to control your content, control your image, all of those things is very important and definitely helps with the safety. And then obviously being able to work online from home allows of additional um, a lot of additional freedom. I think I know that there are successful OnlyFans creators who, use costumes or accessories to cover their face and make themselves more anonymous in certain situations. So that can be something that's pursued as well. Um, Absolutely, I think that online sex work can be empowering, just like other forms, but it's not necessarily. It doesn't have to be. I think a lot of times we fall into a trap of thinking that if somebody's engaging in sex work that, well, it must be because they're empowered by it, and sometimes it's just a job that fits your life and fits your life circumstance and allows you the right work-life balance or accommodates whatever circumstance or situation you have going on. Um, in terms of financial freedom, it's certainly the potential to earn is massive, as we know, right? Not everybody's earning that much, but we do know that women in general are earning more in this industry than men, and it's the only industry that we can say that. So there's definitely more appeal from a financial standpoint for that, I would say. And I think that you don't necessarily have to be making millions from it to consider yourself a success. I think if it's, helping to pay your bills and support you, then that's successful. That's what we look for in success for a job generally. Um, we're covering all of the top 3 questions, is that right?
Yeah, I think like that's a fair bit
Just
if we want to like kind of
briefly,
end.
or okay, yeah, I can end there, or I don't know how
Yeah,
much we want
we'll
to.
end there and then we'll probably prompt you guys again with the next 2
Okay,
questions. Yeah.
perfect.
Lav, I sent you those questions. Do you have an opening statement for us?
Yeah, I obviously came prepared and I wrote a lot in regards to this, and it's gonna be hard for me to like hit every point without going on a tangent. So I have like a mission statement as to like where I came in for this argument, if that's okay,
Sure.
rather than answering the questions by bullet point. Um, so I wrote a man asking a woman to sublimate herself to just a body in exchange for money. In the act itself, he degrades her. There is no job this intimate. It's not like any other job. It's a physical therapy and dance. The woman has to, in order for this exchange to work, subvert her own needs and wants to the needs of her client. The narrative that a woman chooses to do sex work is oftentimes extremely invalid because of a lot of women only choose between this and worse options. Because of the sexist, capitalist, ableist, transphobic, and racist world has failed her. Some women have to do sex work because she has no other way to survive, or the privilege choice, which I understand even less, and why I ultimately decided it was enough for me, obviously. And yeah, I think ultimately sex work is degrading to the woman having sex with her John, or to the people who are masturbating to her. And yeah, and also just like the financial freedom aspect. I think that I could go on. I think that's a good place to start.
Sure. Yeah, we can start there. So I'm going to
Before
open the panel.
you do, before
Yeah.
you do though, I think because it might be a bit confusing. Well, because I'm confused, so maybe other audience members might be confused. Our friend Lavender, right? So
Mhm.
unlike the others here, you're not involved in sex work at all. And you are like, what's your background?
Sex worker for 6 years.
Sex worker. Oh, so you are a sex worker for 6 years, and you just have these stances. Okay. All right.
I'm not. Yeah, I'm not a sex worker anymore.
Not a sex worker. Okay, understood. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Former sex worker.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up now for everyone. Kind of, remember, minute and a half. I'll cue you guys. Go ahead and respond.
Lav, you said something really interesting that I kind of just want to probe into. You said that sex work is degrading to the woman. Can you elaborate on that, what you mean?
Yeah, so as long as a woman is I mean, I did a little bit, but as long as a woman is like offering her body for money that a man has, she's offering herself. Her needs and her sexuality no longer exist to this man. And all he inherently dehumanizes her as she sublimates herself to just a body. And yeah, that's how I feel about that.
Do you
So-
do you Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to like delve in this because I think this is the most interesting criticism you can have of sex work. And the one that I think probably has like the most promise. Because I think all the other ones, like we can go down the road on them, but I think we'll just end up at a point where we're like, well, it's often this case, but not always, and there are ways to do it appropriately. Whereas I think the degradation is more like core, it's more fundamental to the kind of the act itself. So just continuing with like the kind of line of questions, so you said offering your body for a man, where you're sort of reduced to a body, and the man, by reduced, I think you mean that like, and you can correct me if this is not what you mean, but you mean that the man is not really concerned about like the emotionality of the woman or her personality or her feelings. He's just kind of using her image to get off, right?
Yeah, I wrote another bullet point in response to that, so I didn't like get my words jumbled because I slept for 2 hours last night. So, yeah, just my main point. Yeah, like a man can make himself completely vulnerable while paying a sex worker, obviously. But because he's the one with the money, he's always going to be in control. Because men have power over women in literally every sector of society. It's close to impossible for him to ever truly be powerless around a woman or in an engagement with a woman. And definitely like much less like a paid sexual encounter. And yeah, a man in this position is like very plainly doing what men have done for at least the last century, which is asking a woman to strip herself of her personhood and her own personal sexuality for his pleasure. So
Where I really disagree with you with that stance is you present it as it's inherently degrading. There's no way for it to not be degrading. And I just fail to see how in our current realm of sex work content creation, specifically OnlyFans and online, where women are able to produce, or any, whoever the creator is, they're able to produce content that they feel good about, that they want to put out into the public. They're the ones who are calling the shots on what acts they're participating in, what they're not doing, and ultimately choosing if the media is something that they want to share with the public or if they want to reshoot it, so on and so forth. So it is putting them in a position of power to have control over their image and how that content is consumed in this transaction.
So very
And I don't-
quickly add on to that. I think that like you've made this point about whoever has the money has control. But I think that the criticism of sex work that you usually hear from men is that it's very manipulative to men, and that women have a lot of power in sexuality, which they can weaponize to generate a lot of money from men who are like, they're poor, they're lonely. And so really they're saying that it's exploitative in the other direction. And this, I think, like it gets to a more fundamental question about labor in general. Whereas you said that you're like offering your body, and he is the payer has control, which is like a very similar critique that communists and like lefty types have of labor in general, that like the boss, pays, and so he has like total control of the scenario, and he uses you just for your body. He doesn't really care about your mental health. So I think this argument fails for like a similar reason. And that's that just as the boss like profits, he values the labor more than he gives you, you also profit in this transaction. And it's because the only reason you enter sex work or you sell burgers or do any job is because you prefer having that money to having that time or having that energy. So the only reason as long as it's consensual, right? Like, I don't think anyone here is going to defend unconsensual sex work, but especially in the age of the internet and on OnlyFans, it seems like we have an arrangement that is extraordinarily consensual, and it has like the most amount of power and leeway for people to leave the scenario whenever they want, and to engage with
So
it to
so
the
we
extent that
actually
they're
we actually
comfortable.
yeah, so on that last point, we actually know that that's not true. We know that sex work is one of the hardest businesses to get out of. We know that women who are in sex
So
work often
listen to
do
what I said
sex work.
specifically. Because it's online. It's easier than it's ever been. So
No,
I don't think
no.
you disagree
Okay,
with
but
that.
no, I don't. But I also think that when we talk about sex work in general, we can't talk about like the most privileged of sex workers, right? So
Sure,
like
but
if
we are
this is
talking about online
We're
sex work
talking about
specifically in
OnlyFans
this forum. Like,
specifically.
that's
Yeah.
not relevant in this conversation.
sure, but
I would
but
like
I
to.
I
So,
also don't think that
Lavender, I just want to
okay.
make sure you have space to like get your point out before everyone. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Please.
can I go next? Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Cool.
As long as like OnlyFans exists, I think that like we can't live inside of this like vacuum where we're only talking about OnlyFans, because OnlyFans will perpetuate like the same things that in-person sex work does, and actually like it affects, they like take from each other constantly. Because people are either going from in-person street work to OnlyFans, or even OnlyFans to in-person street work, because they're not making enough money and they realize that this is a way that you can make money. We know that a lot of women will go in between online and in person. We know that this is like a very hard place to get out of. Like once you're in OnlyFans, the turnover rate has been like, you know, a lot of women will stay on OnlyFans. Like the higher earners will stay on OnlyFans for a very long time. And also, I forget, you made a couple points, but you made that first point in which you also said that it could be predatory towards men, and I think that that's definitely true. And I think that the reason why that is true is because there's like a section of sex workers who are educated, affluent, white women living in big areas, or you know, vast urban communities or cities, and they're making the decision to do this even though they could have other options. And so that's like something entirely different than like what I'm trying to protect people against, is like becoming like a victim of OnlyFans, and falling down a rabbit hole that you don't necessarily know that you're going into. So like someone with Genevieve obviously is getting like the most you can, and is at the most risk of building a parasocial relationship with her fans that could be you know, bad for them, for the men. But I think in general, in the wider sense, just like how she feels empowered, I don't think that a personal empowerment is like a societal empowerment. So I feel like even though she can be predatory towards her fans, overall this is like a bigger societal issue. And when men think that they can have access to our bodies through monetary gain in the way that we do not have access to theirs in the same way.
Okay.
So if sex workers
so
are white,
I want
affluent,
to.
living in big
I want to
cities,
let
you
in.
would
I
say
want to
that
let
they're
in. I want to let in our friend here.
PrimeCayes.
Yeah, sorry. It's just because I haven't said anything yet. I didn't want to be an asshole and start screaming over people. But yeah, so firstly, I'm a bit confused by the concept that it's degrading. Someone can attempt to degrade you, but how you feel, like how your self-respect is largely to your control. Additionally, sex work is not the only job or career where degradation exists. Like, you can be degraded in any fucking job. So this part is confusing to me. I'm gonna need more information.
Do you think that sex work is the same as any other job? Like exactly?
I never said it was the same. I said that you can be
Well, no, but
degraded.
you said it. Sure, but you said no, but like the degradation is like entirely different, and where there's a man who is paying to see your naked body, and you are like devoid. You sublimate yourself to just your body so that he can get off to you.
I think
Why
there's
is
something
that
essentially
inherently
different with sex
degrading?
work.
Like, you're
What?
not
Yeah,
explaining why that's degrading.
I think the
What do you?
reason why someone would
No,
say that it's
degrading. I'm using
inherently
degrading as like a.
Sorry. Go ahead. Respond,
Go
Lavender.
ahead.
Don't worry. April, I'll make sure you'll
Yeah,
get
go
space to
ahead.
respond. Lavender, please.
Yeah, I think the act in itself for like a man to look at you and again reduce you for a century to a body in the society where we are literally second class to all men still. We in economically, in the government, all these things, and then you are letting him, again, like, just dehumanize you in order to get off. As much as you think that
Have
he...
you never masturbated to somebody that like even if you're not thinking about it, like
No, but
I have
I'm a
some people that I
woman.
thought
No, but
attractive
I'm a
to
woman,
my-
and no, but you're not like understanding. You're like not listening to what I'm saying. So
So
like I'm a
degradation
woman.
is based on the fact that men are in power.
I can explain this
So,
very
okay,
quickly.
Is that
Okay.
yeah.
Not understand that
So,
men are
hold on.
men are like in power in every facet is what
Lavender.
I'm confused
So
about.
Lavender, is it that you're saying like sex work? Well, one, OnlyFans isn't so different from all these other spaces. These boundaries are much grayer and much thinner than people seem to realize. People cross between these boundaries all the time, and that sex work maybe is a reflection of society as a whole, right? So just as women are in a lower status than they are to men, that like any transaction that's happening within the context of sex work is inherently going to be exploitative and can never actually be maybe truly
Societally empowering. It can be individually empowering.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Especially if you're getting like financial freedom. And I think that this also like, this is definitely like very true for black women and trans women also, to like, because we know that classism is like even a bigger divide than sexism, right? So I think that there are certain ways that you can move through the world intersectionally through this and like have your own personal empowerment. But overall, like to pay a woman to, again, sublimate herself to her body to have sex with her is inherently degrading. Yes.
I want to respond to this.
Sure.
Because she had mentioned me earlier as well. Oh, I apologize. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So April desperately wants to jump in. And don't worry, Genevieve, you'll be right after. Okay.
Yeah, just because I was mentioned like a little while back and I wanted to respond to that directly.
Well, April, do you want to give her
Obviously.
Yes, I do. Because
okay.
Because there's something about the degrading that I think that we haven't really gone deep on. And that's that you can argue that the reason why sex work is inherently degrading in a way that other work isn't is because it devalues your sexual worth. If you don't have any nudes online, the nudity is sacred because it's special and private. And pretty much every sex worker has experienced this, where like the first time you post pictures of your naked body online, it's quite a leap, right? Because you're changing something about yourself and about how you view yourself. But then the 100th time, you don't really feel anything. So something has changed internally within you through that process of posting naked pictures. And so I think that if you're going to make the argument that sex work is degrading in a way that is special and unique from other work, I think that you have to hit on that and like how it changes your own self-perception of sexual value.
Genevieve, please.
No, I don't think that it is degrading work. I don't think that it is inherently degrading to like be a sex worker. I think that sex work
You don't
is
think it's
degrading.
inherently. Wait,
You're very confusing in the way you communicate your
Yeah.
point.
So I don't know
Very
what you're
confused.
confused. I don't know what you're
I thought
confused
that's the
about.
argument you were making.
So like
are
no, so you are not degrading yourself by doing sex work. You're participating in the greater degradation of women by choosing to go into this work or by keeping yourself in this work. But obviously a woman's sexual worth is her own. It doesn't matter how many penises go in you, doesn't matter how whatever, your worth, your self-worth does not change. But the idea living in the society that is ran by men, it will change. The way that men will look at you will change. The way that men will look at women will change. This is like, I mean, we know that this is true. We know that this is true.
Let's go
No,
to
I think that's a
our
much
friend.
weaker argument.
So I really want to.
Genevieve.
I really want to respond to a couple things here. Thank you. Two main things here in regards to the degradation, right? As Kelly pointed out, that can happen in any career, and it does. It happens in real life. It happens anytime that a woman chooses to participate in an online community or forum in any way, like even just having a normal ass Instagram, you're going to be objectified by the way you look, whether you're posting yourself nude or not. People are going to feel free to comment on your appearance and be inappropriate. Where I think some of the empowerment comes from with something like OnlyFans is that you are creating an environment where you're saying, in this situation, we can have a sexual dialogue. Whereas in another situation where I'm at the grocery store and you want to talk about my ass, that's inappropriate. That's not okay. On my Instagram picture where I'm sharing my trip to the Grand Canyon with my nephew, probably not a great place to put inappropriate comments. But I'm creating an arena where we can have that exchange and it's honest. And I'm presenting myself in a way that is authentic to myself and my own relationship with my sexuality. And it can be a way of expanding how you feel about yourself in a positive way. I think like the idea that it has to be degrading is kind of absurd. And I think that even if we look at
We should
previous types of like porn or
Two sentences.
published erotica, women in those days had to conform much more to the gaze of men and fitting into this beauty ideal, whereas we don't see that in OnlyFans as much. You're allowed to have variety, you're allowed to be yourself.
Yeah, I think if you give up the argument that it is somehow inherently degrading and that degradation is like applies to you even after you stop or like even when you're not actively doing it, I think the argument kind of falls apart. And for exactly the reason that Madam Genevieve is getting to, which is that sex work, like any other media, creates an environment where people can engage with it and recognize that it isn't necessarily reality. In the same way that people engage with like violent video games, but recognize that it's not reality and they don't actually want to knife their friends, when they're wearing military gear or whatever. Like people are very able to distinguish between these things. And I think that also speaks to like your disagreements with BDSM and with kink. I think people are totally capable of engaging with their partner and recognizing that like kink and whatever play they're getting into is not real life and that it's separate from how they want to be treated or treat their partner in general.
Yeah, I want to
I
add like
think
a
that I think that
positive comment as
you
well. So like prior to having any kind of paid subscription service, I used to get a lot of dick pics in all of my social media. I have quite a big Facebook following, and that used to be the worst. But now I nearly never do, but I get a lot of guys that will ask for permission before doing it on OnlyFans. And so I know it's only a small step in the correct direction, but I think a lot of men have learned via OnlyFans that you kind of need consent to do that first. And also they've learned that they like to have that consent. And I think that that's a good thing.
I totally
The other
agree. I
thing
think
is
that
that
these
I
platforms
do
create an
worry. I do worry
incentive.
that
Hold
that's a
on, hold on,
complete
hold on,
Hold on,
hold
Matt,
on.
we're gonna let Madam go.
I think that these platforms create an incentive for men to behave in a way that is more respectful than you would see on like Facebook or Instagram, right? Like they're engaging with you, they're paying to engage with you. And that transactional element means that they're a lot less likely to just be a total asshole or send you something that's non-consensual, right? They want it to be a mutually beneficial relationship as well.
Lavender. So I want to go to you, but Lavender. Is it the case that and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misunderstanding your point. But it seems to be the case you're trying to like you're not trying to personalize this idea of degradation, right? You're saying that it's on
Of
a
course.
societal wide level. That despite
Yes.
whatever, however, the individual interpersonal actions that these people have with their clients, overall, this is creating a worse environment for women, how women are viewed, their prospects in the world, that type of thing. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, yeah, I'll say two things and I'll say one thing and then I'll read a quote because I think that it's really apt. But yeah, we deserve, you said like that, you could find your sexuality or be comfortable with your sexuality through sex work. And I would encourage every woman to connect with their sexuality and their own sexual prowess without the eyes of a man on you. And I would, yeah, I don't know why we are like,
I'm bisexual, but yeah.
Right. I have a lot of female clients and like, people that
Okay,
are
no, but it
identifying as like trans LGBTQ, whatever.
no, sure,
But
and that's fine. But like are you going to like lie and say that this is something that like isn't like just
well,
objectively
also like,
happening
what
in a
if part of
heterosexual
my
lens?
sexuality is being seen? Like I'm an exhibitionist. So me exploring my
No, okay,
sexuality includes being nude in front of other people. Like
but
that's
for
something that
pay,
I benefit from. Yeah.
sure, but for pay is the problem, and you can't
Well,
do
if you
it.
love
You can't
something, why
anyway.
not do it for money?
Right. Right.
No,
Find a
so
job you
what
love
you're
and you'll
doing,
never work
no,
a day
and
in
I
your
get it.
life.
No, I
Lavender?
get it. And I get I very much understand, like, I might as well monetize off of my oppression, right? Like, and I'll read another quote later about that. But um, this is Esperanza Fonseca, who is a socialist, feminist, and transgender sex worker. And this is a quote that like really stuck out to me and made me start like thinking for the first time about stuff like this. And she says, prostitution has never existed without violence, slavery, patriarchy, and class oppression. Prostitutes experience violence primarily because the relationship between the prostitute and the client is necessarily antagonistic. The session between a prostitute and her buyer is always a power struggle between the man and the woman, the buyer and the bot. Any prostitute knows this intuitively. Clients want us to do more for less money. We want to do less for more money. This isn't dependent on the disposition of the client. The structural positions of the buyer and the bot necessitate these interests. While you can say this antagonism does exist in all labor under capitalism, the difference is that the power struggle is enacted in such a tangible way during sex, a sex that most in the trade were coerced into by material conditions. Sexual violence is a necessary component of the equation. Every interaction as a prostitute is to fight a battle on the terrain of our own body. The prostitute is fighting for her right to bodily autonomy, and the client is fighting for his entitlement to her body.
Yeah, this is the problem, is we keep jumping between this like Maud and Bailey, where we're talking about like real life sex work when it's convenient, and then we're going back to OnlyFans. And the conversation is about OnlyFans. So I think we should stick with that. And like, you're not having sex with your clients on OnlyFans.
The argument here, Lav, is that OnlyFans is a much safer option to in real life prostitution.
Yeah,
that's literally the whole point of the conversation.
I think Lavender is trying to say. I think Lavender is trying to say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Lavender, you're trying to say that these boundaries that you're drawing between OnlyFans and these other things don't actually exist, right? Like she's saying prostitution, right, and sleeping with clients.
Yeah, that would be an absurd argument.
She's not talking about.
No, it's
she's
not
talking about.
No, that's not
like somebody who participates in both. It is. They are not the same thing. They are extremely different. And as like literally the only person on this panel that I know of who's openly disclosing that they do in real life sex work, like it's not the fucking same.
I did full service sex work before I did this. It is the same idea. It is exactly what I read. It happens pervasively throughout all forms of sex.
The conversation is online sex work not like a million times safer and better for the creator?
Is it safer?
You have to acknowledge.
But safety does not mean that this is a greater societal issue. Safety is not the only thing that we should be looking at.
We're letting down all the women.
Of course, we should be safe. I believe in decriminalization for sex workers, not Johns. I don't believe that anyone should be paying for sex. I think that should be criminalized.
So we should criminalize the consumer of a consensual transaction.
Prostitution. We give this long quote that's talking about like in real life prostitution, and then we're back to the protected discussion about OnlyFans.
I have a hard time. Like, I don't know if you're just like not following what I'm saying.
What we're asking for you is to stay on subject. We're asking for you to stay on the topic that was presented, and you're not. You are not. You are derailing the in real life.
And the topic.
No, you just.
It's because you don't understand.
Pull it back. Pull it back. Okay. All right. So our friend Lavender and Lavender, let me know if I ever put any words in your mouth, because I'm not trying to do that, right? But it seems like she's saying that this is all on a continuous spectrum, right? Sex work. And that OnlyFans falls in a particular spectrum. And this antagonistic relationship exists there as well, right? Now you can say that certain aspects of it may be higher or lower, right? Maybe the parasocial relationship, corrosive parasocial relationship is higher in that aspect, right? And the danger is lower, but still that these relationships are inherently antagonistic and detrimental to women. So you're saying, people are saying that she's being off topic, but she's using the words of like I guess not philosophers, or I'm not sure what you call them, but thinkers who are talking about sex workers in general, right? So maybe saying prostitute or IRL sex work, but that the lessons that can be drawn there can be applied in various ways to different levels of sex work, including OnlyFans, including streaming. This is when you pay for. There's other sex works. I can't remember the name.
Yeah. So let me respond to this. Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Because I agree. It is a spectrum. All right. It's all part of the sex work category. Right. But it's they're important distinctions. And like the quote that she read draws specific eyes to those distinctions. So the quote that she's talking about, it draws eyes, it draws attention to the fact that when you are in a scenario where someone is trying to have sex with you physically, you're in real life, that introduces a level of danger, right? So like we have to like talk about things that aren't related to that level of danger, which we can do, and which I think that Lav is getting to. But like, I think it's just frustrating when we keep going back to like this very evocative imagery, which is important, but not super relevant to the discussion. And so we're using that evocative imagery to like taint the rest of the conversation. And I think that's very frustrating. So let's
No,
focus
I
on like,
Yeah. So like for
I
me,
think it's
the
actually I
issue.
think it shows something bigger is that like you don't know how to like these
Okay.
things are like not like these things are inherently together. You cannot have a conversation about OnlyFans and not have a conversation about greater sex work. It is fucking impossible to. And the reason why you doing it is because you know that there are flaws in your argument. You know that you cannot say that these things are not true. And so you want to focus on the positives of OnlyFans because it's something that is important to you, that you've made money from. But still, overall, you cannot not talk about this when we are talking about something like sex work. It is insane to do so, and it's retarded to do so.
So
let's
for
go
my
to
issue,
let's do
Can
Kelly.
we let Kelly talk? Can we
Yeah,
please
hey,
let
I'm
Kelly
gonna bring
talk?
out the British soon,
Yeah,
and
let's
then
let
you'll
let's
hate
have
me. My accent
Kelly,
is
please
dreadful. Right?
respond.
Okay. So my issue with this is, yes, OnlyFans and street walking can be considered related, but that's in the same way that someone that has a shop and sells merchandise can be related to someone who sells shit off the back of a van. It's like, yes, they're doing the same thing, but one is illegal and has very little in the way of restrictions and things like this, and the other is an actual job. So it's just like, and when you start adding in prostitution, which can be like trafficking and things like this, which is like, again, it's like another level of illegality of a job that is not what we're really discussing at the moment. It's like, yes, all of these things are related, but that doesn't mean that they are the same and they're appropriate
no
to be
one's saying
discussing
they're
in
not
this
related or not like
What we are
very
saying
tied to each other.
What we are saying is that if we're going to have a
they're
general
completely interlocked.
conversation about sex work, and the question is, do we think that online sex work is a safe option for creators? You're proving the point that yes, it is inherently safer than the other options of sex work available. Like you're trying to argue that it's not safe, but by the quotes you're presenting is proving that online sex work is the safest. Like you're arguing against yourself.
So to be clear, what she's arguing for, hold on, Lev. What she's arguing for specifically is she's already acknowledged that yes, it is safer to be on OnlyFans than to do IRL. But she's arguing that the issue is that it's still contributing to the antagonism that seems inherent between buyer and producer, because it still fundamentally relies on this. And the issue that she's outlining is that even though it's safer, the commodity that is up for exchange is somebody's body. And often in sex work, from my understanding, so correct me if I'm wrong, Lev, is a woman's body specifically, or a femme presenting person's body. And so there's an inherent antagonistic nature that she's concerned about that contributes to a greater zeitgeist, essentially, of essentially dehumanizing femme presenting people more.
I do understand that.
Yeah,
I do
so
understand that, but I think that
that's an interesting discussion.
Can we not agree that by giving women the platform such as OnlyFans, that we're probably reducing the number of women who would otherwise turn to these forms, therefore creating less oppression by people thinking that they have to do, in real life prostitution. Like we're literally reducing the need for that by giving online options.
So I did look that up. There's no evidence to produce that people are still at the same rate on the street.
There's always going to be a demand for in real life sex work because it's not the same thing, but there's a personal decision where, like, I know you like to use an example of an 18-year-old signing up for OnlyFans and not really understanding. Like, I think there's a lot more benefit to her doing that than to going to a strip club, which also advertised to just turned 18-year-old women.
Yes, but it's still like, yeah.
Lavender, though, I think you're saying that, like, Genevieve, right now, it sounded like what you were trying to say is that OnlyFans is an alternative to these other more dangerous and corrosive forms of sex work. But I think what Lavender was trying to say that all of it is, right? Like that that you can say there are different benefits and advantages from doing it through OnlyFans or cam grilling, which is what I was trying to think of before. I couldn't think of that, but cam grilling, right?
So
you
my
could-
point here is, should we not try to make baby steps and endorse and support things that are improvements upon previous systems?
No, but you don't even want to acknowledge. So you want to, so you do want to help but you also you won't even say that's true. Like you won't even acknowledge that these things are true and the safeties and the greater societal impact. And you're just like, no, but we can
I
do
have
little things.
absolutely acknowledged that sex workers are at greater risk of harm. That is not a question.
Well, no, but
what I am
risk
saying,
at harm
this
because of
option, the new
what?
platforms, the new things that we have available, I think will in the long term reduce the harm towards sex workers because more of them will be in safer situations.
So how will this make men look at us differently? It's
because we're training and incentivizing them to message us in appropriate forums and exchange with us in sexual ways when we say it's okay.
Should not be. Well, no, they should not be engaging.
They shouldn't be engaging in sexual ways. We shouldn't be engaging sexually. That's your argument?
No, that's not my argument at all. They should not be engaging in a sexual way for money. They should not be paying you for your body.
Why?
The
service I'm providing isn't valuable.
Entitled. They think that they are so entitled to your body, and you just have to name a fucking price.
Entitlement would be consuming it for free.
This seems a bit harsh on men, and I almost never go with that angle.
No, entitlement doesn't necessarily mean it's for free, right? Entitled means
But if you were entitled, you would expect.
If you were entitled to something, you would expect something for free or less.
No,
easier access.
No.
So
if you are not an entitled person, then you're going to have to work harder.
Do you think that do you think your fans would not be super psyched if you made it less money?
Obviously. That's what I'm saying. They would like to have more for free, but I'm instead choosing to put a higher value on myself.
That's just capitalism, right?
Exactly.
Yes. No, and capitalism is also
I have a question for Lav. So you said that, well, part of your quote that I think is interesting and relevant to both online sex work, OnlyFans, and whatnot, is that sex work is exploitative because on one end, someone has money and they're trying to get as much as possible from the woman. And on the other end, the woman is trying to give as little as possible. So there's tension, right? And there's conflict in that, right? I'm sorry.
That's a question to you, Lev.
Yeah, sorry, it was a question. Is this something you feel is inherent to why it's bad?
Yeah, just so you know, Lav, your mic is cutting out typically at the beginning of your sentences. So if you're giving short statements, we're missing it. No worries, just so you know.
Oh,
that is so annoying. Oh no.
I'm gonna assume
you can do what I do and go and then start talking.
Do you have push to talk on? Because that might help.
No, but I can try.
While we're waiting, can we maybe agree on some landscape that I think we're all agreeing on, but we kind of sometimes circle back to, so I just want to get it out of the way. Are we all agreeing that OnlyFans is demonstrably safer for the sex worker than street or IRL sex work?
Yeah, I think what Lav would say is that OnlyFans feeds into street sex work.
I'm just saying physical safety though. I get that, but is it literally physically safer for the OnlyFans?
Literally, in the moment, she would say yes. Or
they're going to get assaulted less often. Yeah. They're going to get raped less often. So in the very tangible. So I just want to make sure we've got at least one foundation that we're agreeing on, because I think we all agree with that.
If we can steel man Lav's argument, she would also say that if you produce all of the sexual content, and men generally view women as the kinds of people who want to be sexualized, they might feel more comfortable, for example, catcalling women because they view them as more sexual objects. Is that kind of the route that you're going down, Lav?
Sure, I think that is what is going to happen, but I also don't think that men care at all what we want and feel with our bodies at this point. So.
Okay, and so I think that would be a good central disagreement, because I think that people.
I've done in-person sex work I've been doing sex work for before I was able to or legally able to. I've been doing it for 7 years. Yeah, I'm completely black-pilled. I've met enough men that I know how they work. So.
You still have a boyfriend,
this is the point of central disagreement, right?
My boyfriend doesn't.
Hold on, we're going to let Taff. Hold on, we're going to let Taff finish.
Yeah, I think this is like a place that we can maybe argue about genuinely and like focus on, is that like I think that people are very capable of distinguishing between reality and what they're seeing like on their screens in pornography or in video games or movies or whatever. I think that like OnlyFans does a good job in general of making sure that you're seeing it as like a fantasy. Like their rules are very explicit. Like you can't have like guns that are like obviously that like look like real guns. Like you have to make this like obviously a fantasy thing. And I think that's good. And I think in
Wait,
general,
why
people
is
are
that?
capable.
Why can't we have guns on OnlyFans?
Because you're trying to make it clear that this isn't real. That you're not actually like threatening people with a real
That
gun.
these women, like these women are not real.
No,
These
No,
women
so
are
there's
These
obviously
women
no
are
real
providing
life.
fantasy
Not real.
entertainment. We're providing fantasy entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. So like in the same sense that
okay.
like
No, and
characters in a
in that
movie.
you are dehumanized. How do you not understand that? You're like,
No,
oh,
like
none of
I
this
have
is real.
fantasies as well, and I'm not dehumanizing the people that I fantasize about either. Like that fantasization and thinking about other people in a way that is sexual is a natural element of the human experience.
Sure, but paying for it
Totally
is not.
possible
So
to
the
do that
power,
without
the
dehumanizing
inherent
people.
power dynamic, the power dynamic should not be inherent. We should not allow that to happen. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Is that like the way in which we exist under this like male gaze, this patriarchy, where someone can pay for your autonomy, should not exist.
Yeah, so there are
We
two
should be
arguments here.
going away from this.
And one is
Pay for
the
my
like, societal
autonomy.
degradation thing, which is like my response would that be that people can distinguish between fantasy and reality. And the second argument is
can't.
this like,
I can show you
yeah,
some
okay, so
stats because I know
we can
they
argue
can't.
about that. But like the other thing is that like the argument about exploitation, just like with the money, right? And I think that like I disagree with that on like a purely capitalist basis, in that like this is a critique that is levied at everything, minus the degradation. That's special to, OnlyFans. And that's argument 2. But argument 1 is about like the money and the inherent exploitation in like paying someone for, their time, for their work, for their body to do something. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think people enter into these, these agreements consensually and they both benefit from it. So we can go down
What does it
either of
have to
those
do with
roads.
autonomy? That's what I'm really confused. Like, someone gives me money, they get some big titty cosplay pics. Like, what does that have to do
No,
with my
it's actually
autonomy?
Right.
I'm
If
so
anything, that
it's
feels
definitely okay, here's what I think is like the
What does
big
that
problem here
mean?
is that I don't think that you're understanding that your body autonomy is your own. So without the presence of a man, right? You're not understanding.
I couldn't sell that if I wanted to.
And that actually no, you are selling that, and that's what I like feel sad for you that you can't acknowledge and separate that for yourself.
You feel sad for me.
She also feels
But what
sad
is the
for me.
difference
Don't worry.
between
We
me and
can
any other model taking pictures
we can be
for
dumb
money?
sluts together.
What's the difference?
No,
Do you think
So
the idea that a man's view in the patriarchy and the way that we live in society, it's insane to me that you don't think that you being naked is different than him seeing you as a cashier. Like, it is so crazy to me that you cannot wrap that around your brain.
I said I don't know what that
Wait,
has to do with my
okay,
autonomy.
wait.
There's an
We're gonna
important
back up.
similarity.
Wait. We're gonna back up. Okay, let's back up to actually a more fundamental question then that I didn't include in the prompt, but I think is actually being raised here. Is there a difference between sex work and any other work, and is there any other work field that is in any way similar or has levels of like essentially what you have to give in it? Is there any work that's similar, or is it just like most other work? I think that's a really fundamental question.
I think there's
every
a difference.
industry is going to have like its unique challenges, obviously. So sex work is unique in that regard that we could say coal mining is unique or like deep sea fishing is unique to other industries. So yes, obviously.
No.
However, we also have a lot of similarities in that we live in a society which we all have to do something in order to earn money to support ourselves and continue to participate in society. And it's going to be inherently exploitative in some capacity because we're all agreeing that we're going to perform in some way for a paycheck. Like that's the common theme here.
So there are two
Just
things
to
that
clarify my
exist.
question, though. Wait. Just to clarify my question, is there anything that's quite akin? Because if you look at like coal mining, you can still find lots of jobs that like the risks and like all of the costs are associated with it. Lots of other fields will have like coal mining. There's going to be other things associated with like diamond mining or like labor jobs, depending on like body costs. If you even look at something like a
Sure, yeah.
psychologist,
So
you could map onto like counselors or social workers of the emotional cost. Is there anything
I guess I
similar
could
to
have
sex
said
work?
like mining in general, or for example, like another like we can look at all sorts of broadly termed jobs that require you to use your physical body in a way that might give you increased risk, and or a broadly termed, you know, assortment of service jobs which require your emotional labor in a similar way.
You're not understanding is that there's another layer to this job. So let me try to break it down. So
Please
the
go ahead.
inherent difference between the two sexes, the one thing that is true between the two sexes, regardless of like all this weird like men are better than women, women are better than men, misogyny, misandry, the one difference is that one can kill the other with their bare hands. And we have created a society where in which a man can own and control a woman and has a man can rape, a man has been raping, men have been raping since the dawn of time. They've completely tried to, religion has exist to make us pure, to sublimate us to a body, to something to be owned, to chattel basically until the maybe half of this century. Okay. And so this is the framework that we're working off of. And when you're like, I'm empowered because I am making money off of this, no, you are digging us deep. We're not coming out of this trench. There's no way to come out of this trench.
I'm not empowered because I'm making money from this. I'm empowered because I get to
No,
live my life authentically, in a way that I didn't when I worked in corporate America. So like if I'm going to speak about my personal empowerment,
is different
that's
than
my stance.
female empowerment.
And then when
Okay,
I
so
talk in a general standpoint with, if you
Glad we
could
gotta
just
let
let me
Jen
respond to you,
finish.
if you could let me respond to you. As I've said on numerous occasions, and you don't seem to be listening or comprehending, by creating these online communities, we are rewriting the rules for interaction between men who want to consume sexuality and women who want to provide it.
So have
We
men
are
stopped
giving
raping?
a better balance. I'm not saying it's an overnight fix, but what I am saying is in these
It's not a fix at
environments,
all.
they're controlled situations where women have agency over how these interactions are happening that we probably didn't have in previous
think you
situations
have
or in
agency.
Getting
real
rid of
life.
sex
OnlyFans is
work when
not
it's not
rape.
rape. Why
Like-
do you keep going on about rape? Like, what is this? How does this relate to anything?
Right, like if I'm
I'm
only
having a
doing
hard time,
OnlyFans,
like,
I
I don't know
am
if I'm losing
probably
you
not
guys.
going to be at a high risk for rape. Like if we direct it back to the question, is OnlyFans
No,
safe?
you aren't.
Yeah.
You aren't. Okay, you are not. But you are perpetuating a societal structure that affirms men into thinking that a woman's body is something they can have, they can cultivate. That is something
Why
that is
not
for their
create an
enjoyment.
arena
Why in
where
the
they
world
can
would you think
consume
that
it
this is going to
consensually?
stop
Hold on, we gotta let Lav finish.
Yeah, so Lavender finished, and I want to try to have another clarifying question. Lavender, our friend is clearly getting a bit frustrated here, and I really want to get her point across because I think a lot of it's being lost here. But please go ahead, Lavender.
Yeah. So yeah, just as you like, you are perpetuating, and I honestly I don't think that you understand this. So I'm not faulting you because I don't think that it is sex workers' problem or fault that we are here, right? I think that we were put here because capitalism has failed us, because men give us very few roles, right? In which we can make the amount of money that we do, right? At least in a comfortable environment. So we are kind of, even if you think it's a choice, like you said, you feel better in where you're at than even in a fucking office because of the way that men treat us. So now you have decided, okay, fuck, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. And that's what you've done. So this, even though you feel personally empowered because you can make money this way, you are contributing to a bigger societal structure in which men think that they can still denigrate you and sublimate you to your body that they have access to. They still have entitlement to you, even if you put a price tag on it.
Let's go.
Yeah,
to-
but this is
let's
nonsense.
go to
Kelly.
Kelly.
Right?
Kelly?
I haven't spoken properly in a while.
Please.
So women have been getting degrees at higher rates than men for a little while now. We have more opportunities than we ever have not to have to do sex work. So this idea that we're fundamentally having to do it It's like I think pretty much everyone in here chose to do it, and I
Do you
appreciate
think
that
it's
is a
access to
privilege.
education?
Let her finish. Don't worry.
What?
We're
I
gonna
didn't hear
get
you,
back to
sorry.
you. Kelly, did you finish?
What did she say? Yeah, I finished. It's fine.
Okay, not Kelly, Lavender. Can you do me a favor, right? Because you've been trying to make this distinction, and I don't think it's very clear to the rest of the panel between female empowerment and personal empowerment. You're saying, personal empowerment isn't the same as this, right? You can get personal empowerment from the act of sex work, which is what everyone seems to be agreeing here. But you're trying to make a larger distinction between female power in general. Could you maybe define these two things and like contrast them?
Can regard it to capitalism, and I kind of wrote this thing. So financial and freedom and empowerment is a weird dichotomy. Personal financial independence and freedom in this country means you are someone who could make the system work for you. When often these women are people who could not otherwise. Majority of women who do sex work are doing it because they need to do sex work and not a choice. There is something bigger than personal empowerment and personal financial freedom. The rich are getting richer while the poor are getting poorer, obviously. I hate to bring the anti-capitalist sentiment into this constantly, but capitalism as a whole fails more people than it empowers. It empowers the few. So 37 million Americans are living just over poverty or below poverty line. Meanwhile, according to Forbes, there are around 2,000 billionaires in the world, right? So these people are empowered by capitalism. They love it. They've gotten all that they can out of it, right? They are making use of a system that could have oppressed them or that is like whatever. But in doing that, capitalism is doing its job and making poor people poorer. They're still on the fucking street. So even though these people are personally empowered, the idea of capitalism is still making it so that people like me have to do sex work and denigrate themselves. And here's the thing is like, how empowering is that framework at all? Do we value societal empowerment or personal selfish empowerment? I guess is the question. And it's the same with sex work. OnlyFans models are living the best lives of the sex work umbrella. What does that mean for every other woman that is affirmed in that her body is something men can buy and sell, even if you're making money off of it?
Okay, so I want to
But
be clear.
then you quit, so you don't have to.
I just want to be clear. So,
So,
and what you're trying to describe, and I think I have it right, but I might have it wrong. So when you're talking about personal empowerment would be the financial independence. It would be being able to create your own schedule. It would be able to work independently, especially if you're like a disabled person or trans person, someone who is outside the margins. Okay, so you can get that personal empowerment from sex work. You've acknowledged that. Everyone else acknowledged that. Okay, putting that aside, you're talking about female empowerment and how sex work is a detriment to that in general. And so if I guess what you're saying is that simply playing into the system of sex work, of as you like this exploitation of the female body and this antagonistic relationship, this I guess plays into the capitalist system, and it doesn't in any way lift up like women in general, right? We can imagine some sort of system being put in place, right? Some like female reparations.
Yeah, so this is complacency.
Dynamic. This would be the opposite.
Yeah, so this is complacently. We're making the best that we can out of like a garbage situation by doing something like OnlyFans and by having the opportunity to build personal financial freedom, right? But overall, this needs to be gone. We need to be equal to a man. We need to be in the same facets. We need to be in the same workforces. Men need to feel like they can go into nursing jobs. Women need to feel like they can be high-powering CEOs. This will not happen in the scope of like allowing sex work to be like a positive thing that we talk about, like a positive othering. But anyway, there was one last quote, and I think it's perfect here because this is a woman who's the same trans woman who wrote this, and I think that this is really important as a trans perspective. She said, in the transgender community, prostitution is glamorized. In a world where trans women of color are murdered by men of our own race and class with impunity, where men will fuck us in private but act like they never knew us in public, where we are rejected from jobs, housing, and cut off from our families and communities, I understand why prostitution made us feel powerful. In many ways, being a prostitute is a complete rejection of all we've been through. Fuck the man that won't hold my hand in public. I'll charge him instead. fuck my family for rejecting me, fuck that job for firing me, I don't need them anymore. The whole world can reject me and it doesn't matter because I could make it my own. I could make money from it. Not to mention, for those of us who are not independently wealthy, usually our only option for transition-related medical care is through prostitution, whether we like it or not. But the reality of being a transgender prostitute or a prostitute at all is not simple. What started out as empowering in my mind quickly became a trap that I could not escape. The longer in the trade, the harder it is to leave. I've been raped more times than I can count. This is not, even though she was making as much money as she could, men were still treating her like garbage. So even though in your frame, in your little space that you've created, you walk outside and nothing has changed. You are at risk for the same things every female is at risk for.
Okay, so I want to jump in on that because I think that maybe you can point to a kind of prisoner's dilemma where, and this gets to like the personal empowerment versus female empowerment, where you can say that by engaging in sex work, you can make a lot of money. That's great for you. But like the end result is that like by engaging in this kind of like defection, you make it worse for women overall, right? And so the idea is that like you're degrading women or making it women like more likely to experience violence or more likely to be like, you know, not allowed into positions of power, right? And so this is like the argument too that I really want to go down and have like a deep conversation on. Earlier, Lav, you mentioned having studies on this of like the causal link between OnlyFans and, you know, degrading. I don't know exactly what they say. So I just want you to like, you know, bring those up so that we can like discuss those. I think that would be interesting.
It's not causal. It's not causal because in social sciences, it's like really hard to have causals because there are so many like contributing factors, but there are correlations. So there are correlations in mostly like porn. So this is under the umbrella of porn, whereas like OnlyFans is so new, there are like not a lot of studies on it. But we know that the parasocial relationship porn is like more so, it's more apt than like a prostitution, right? But this is like a big.
So what do they say specifically? Or just give me like the strongest one and then we can argue about that.
Sure.
Give me a second because I wrote
While
a
you
lot,
look for
so.
that, I want to mention like something that
I think that's interesting and that's like crucial. And like I'm calling these like argument 1 and argument 2. And like argument 1 is like the capitalism argument that it's like exploitative in the way that like in general labor is exploitative and that's bad. But then argument 2 is this like special thing that pornography and sex work has, which is like the sexual and female degradation, which I think is like really more to the heart of it, because I don't really want to have like a capitalism argument, because if we go down that road, we're always going to be saying like, well, there's something special. So like, I think we can maybe just like shelve that for now and really focus on argument 2.
Yeah, I want to just comment on like the idea of empowerment of women as a whole, right? I'm sure we've all heard the quote of empowered women empower women. By empowering women at an individual level, we are inherently going to empower women at the group level. And if we're talking specifically about marginalized communities, specifically about sex workers, if we're talking specifically about sex workers and we're empowering them to have greater control over their image online, that will ultimately, I believe, lead to empowerment across the board of people realizing where there are appropriate forums to engage in sexual behavior and where there isn't. People learning how to create boundaries.
I'm going to toss this to Taff just because she's had a little bit less speaking time than Lav, because I know Taff disagreed with this as well as Lav.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that like we can just acknowledge that it's possible to like personally benefit while you like make things worse for other people. So I think we should just like be willing to bite that bullet that it's possible. And then I think that we should just go down that road, like as Lav is bringing up these studies, because I think that's really the more interesting road to go down. But that's all I wanted.
I mean, does it really make things worse for people, though? Because if we abolished the majority of sex work, that would just drive it to be all underground, right?
I think that would be probably pretty bad, but we'll talk about that, because I think that the best way to handle this culturally and socially is to acknowledge that like there's a large proportion of people who like enjoy, you know, sex work for the exhibitionist aspect. And I think it's true of a lot of sex workers. Like Genevieve mentioned this is also something that I experience, where like I just enjoy it kind of inherently. And the way that I approach sex work is like I never post if I don't want to post. I only post things that I want to, right? So like we can acknowledge that that exists, but then we should like talk about this other side of it, which is like well, maybe it's like good for me, but like, what is the effect that it's having more broadly, and how do we like minimize those harms while also allowing people to express their sexuality openly?
Lavender, you
Sure,
can
there's
reply.
negatives to everything though, right? There's no such thing as the thing
Yeah,
that
exactly,
only has
exactly.
positive
And that's like
and
the boring nuanced take, but I think that's really true. And so Lav studies.
So
Sorry.
Lavender, I want you to respond. After that, let's maybe try to transition because I'm not sure we can make any more
Sure.
progress on this
I
particular point. But go ahead.
So yeah, we'll go into like, so what do we do about it in a second. But the last thing, so I'm confused on like I was looking for the studies and I was like, wait, what studies? Do I have to prove to you that we like we are under men in every facet of societies and then they see us as sexual beings? Like I don't know actually what you wanted me, because I have like porn stats on how like porn desensitizes people to violent sex, right? But I don't have like I don't know if there is a study for like what you are wanting me to prove other than like that we just like exist in this space. And also I wanted to point out that I don't know what I think that maybe Taftaj, you're in a unique position as a trans woman.
Mhm.
But I don't know how old you guys are, and I don't know what your education level is, and I don't know like where you're coming from. Whereas like I was like homeless and like I need like it was like this or kill myself. So I think that there's a greater sense of urgency when I'm like, obviously you guys are like, yeah, there's nothing bad in it for me, I'm making a bunch of money, when like that is not the case for the majority of sex workers, like the vast majority of sex workers. So I think that when you guys are talking about like how great it is, I actually think it does like a genuine disservice to the sex industry as a whole, because we know that most people who are in sex work are actually being trafficked. So I just feel like this
Yeah, so I want to extend a
That's
bit of
such
an
a
olive
crazy-
branch to Lav here, because
sorry,
like
you not think that that's true? That's actually insane.
I said that's such a completely
Most
separate
traffic?
conversation between consensual sex
No.
work and trafficking. Like,
This isn't
I just
Oh my
doing
god,
anything.
I'm going crazy. I actually can't even believe that you
and
guys
we
like are
know
not-
that when sex work is legal or legalized or decriminalized, that yes, we see an immediate bump in reports of trafficking, but in the long run, it leads to less crimes in the long
No.
run.
guys,
No,
You
we
will
can-
at
no,
first
we
see
can-
a bump.
we can
You will
extend
at
the
first see a
bench
bump
here.
because
We
people
can-
feel
we can
comfortable
meet.
reporting it.
If anyone has studies, you need to
No.
post them in the group conversation so we can all look at the studies. And you also need to take a clip of where in the study you're citing from, if you've got
Yeah,
actual
do you think it's
statistics, so we can
relevant?
all look at it. That way we're not having to like dig through your source. So if people want to post studies, welcome to. I'll post them to the chat as well. That's just typically my rule. Take a screenshot of where you're
So
citing.
I think there's something special about sex work, and especially online sex work. But this is true of like real life sex work and prostitution, which is that like in some sense the barrier to entry is like very low, which makes it like an enticing option for people who don't have any other opportunities, right? And that way, like it can be exploitative in the same way that like there are migrant workers who come from Mexico. Yeah,
And
so
that is exploited.
we're talking about a very specific scenario. No, just let me get through this, okay? Because I'm extending an olive branch to you, which is that like you have these migrant workers that come over from Mexico into the U.S., into like southern Texas and California and whatnot, and they don't have a lot of opportunities, which makes them especially vulnerable to be exploited from, schemes and employees that are not going to pay them well, that are going to treat them very poorly. They don't have a lot of opportunities or legal recourse if they are treated poorly. And so like there's specific environment in which a lot of people engage with sex work or like migrant work. So like these are not the same thing, but they are like similar in this one dimension, in which case that there's like a lot of vulnerable people who engage in the kind of work that we're talking about. So there's like more potential for harm. And what I would say is that like this is a problem that you can get rid of in sex work. So like you can change the way that people relate to sex work and the way that, society is functioning to make it so there are people who are, who may be vulnerable, but they have other options that aren't sex work. And I think that that would be, a better option than like demonizing sex work itself. Because I think your problem really is like, at least in this specific case, you have other problems with sex work. But on this specific point, the problem is really like the vulnerability and the tendency of vulnerable people to engage with the kind of work.
No, there's like a bunch of things, and I've said them all.
I know. There's a bunch of things, but let's focus on this point.
Well, you're taking us
Oh,
like a bunch of places, but when you said it with the like migrant workers, it's like similar in that one way, sure.
Mhm.
But the biggest difference, and what I am trying to explain, is that those migrant workers are not they're being exploited, absolutely. But sex workers are very unique in the way that they're being exploited and also capitalizing off of their oppression, affirming it. This is the only job that does this. This is the only job that does this in America, where we are literally actively saying like, oh, this thing that I hate and that puts me at risk of rape and all these societal mores and who's keeping me, you know, in this trad wife mindset, all of these things that perpetuate this, I'm going to make money off of it to make the best of my situation, but you are not acknowledging that when you do that, it is doubling down. It is doubling down the thing in which is oppressing us. And that is the problem. That is the greater problem.
Yeah, so like
And that is
Genevieve,
why
you posted something interesting about how if there's more porn, there's less sexual assault. I don't necessarily understand that. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I'm actually sorry, I had zoned out for a moment just because I'm in the process of pulling like some of the relevant parts of that article. So
I'll
let
look
me.
for you while you're talking as well. I'll start
Cool.
scrolling through.
I'm getting there
Okay,
right
and then
now
just,
here.
you know, if I can give Lav like some more insight into what I was asking for earlier. We had this discussion about degradation, and then you mentioned having studies. I took that to mean that you had studies that show that porn causes more degradation, or like at the very least is very highly correlated with more degradation on a societal level. So maybe you didn't mean to say that, but if that is something that you have, I think that would be really interesting to look into.
There's like a degradation in which is like very like aggressive, in which is like you know, violent sex being called like a whore during sex, being called useless. There's a study that I can post like the whole thing, in which like 88% of porn on RedTube and Pornhub was violent. So this is like a denigration, degradation, you know, name calling, violence, like in
Yeah, can you post that study as well?
Yeah.
There's
So
an
that's like
extra step here though in the logic, right? Which is not just that like there is porn that involves like denigrating, you know, sexual fantasies, but in
It's porn.
fact that causes, you know, degradation that is non-consensual elsewhere. And I think that's like the more meaningful argumentative step to take here.
Okay, I'm gonna just post this whole document because I can't. There's like a lot in here.
Does it make that like next step there, or is it just saying that there's a lot of degrading porn on porn
Okay,
sites?
so there's a lot of degradation. Okay, so this is the problem. So now we're getting into like the weeds of something completely entirely different. So because degradation and this porn is plentiful, and it is overwhelmingly women who's the victim, or who is like this is happening to on Pornhub. And also men are watching porn like younger and younger and younger. So the median age now is like 12. And so we are learning a sexual script through porn. And because of the porn that is so plentiful is violent towards women, this is becoming something that is like more pervasive in society. One in 4 women in the UK during consensual sex have reported their partner like without asking them, like just choking them or trying something that they learned in porn. And I'm sending you this it's okay, this is an outline. This is just a place where I've put like a bunch of things. So it looks like very much not put together, but everything's here, in which I talk about like porn addiction. I talk about men. Yeah, this is like a whole other
If you
thing,
could just like focus on like one specific claim, I think that would be good.
The thing is, I don't doubt that porn had negative effects on the way that men view women, but I don't see how that relates to OnlyFans, which tends to be very different because we're making our own content, and usually it's okay.
I'm sorry. I'm like I'm losing patience because I literally have explained to you that like you cannot have a conversation about like if we want to talk about OnlyFans, this is like whole other thing. Like it just doesn't exist. Like,
yeah, but there can be a positive impact on the creators that have OnlyFans on the men that are subscribed to them.
Okay, I'm going to stop.
No, because they're learning
Let Kelly speak,
from
please,
us.
love.
Yes, behavioral things that are better. I'm not saying that in every situation there isn't any negativity. But I have noticed a shift in the way that men behave. And because they're not just watching porn produced by men for men, that is and can be pretty inherently violent in nature, which does affect the way that when you grow up, what you think you want and such, and it will influence it. But I'm not sure. I feel like OnlyFans, for the most part, does the opposite of this.
I do think, Kelly, you're getting to something important, which is that like the problem I don't think is inherently like nudity online or masturbation or pornographic materials. But like when Lav brings up the idea that when you go on to Pornhub, there's a very high percentage of it that involves like violent pornography. I think that she's pointing out that like maybe the way that we engage with pornography is not good. And so I think that that would be like a more nuanced take, is to say that like, well, you can have online sex work and you can have pornography, but there needs to be some like social agreement, you know, whether that's legal or cultural, that means that discourages people from engaging in certain kinds of depictions.
We
So
agree
yeah,
on
I
it.
think that that would be like, and that's like the boring nuanced answer, but I think that that's the most reasonable take.
Okay, so why do I need to prove this? We all agree.
Well, you
I'm-
just said that you had evidence, so I was curious
No,
about it.
no, but what?
So,
But if we, but
what do you
all
think
know
about
that
the
this is-
studies that I posted, Lav, that show, like, if we look at, obviously the internet's been around since around 2000, late 90s, right? And there's that comment that I posted from the second article that shows that the reports of sexual assault have actually reduced since 1995, which could possibly show that online
here's
porn
another thing.
consumption can be a positive, which ties back to what I was saying. It gives an outlet, an appropriate outlet for people to experience.
Consider this. Do you think rape is underreported?
Obviously, but it's always been. It's not.
Do you
That's not
think
a new thing.
No. Do you think sex worker rape is ever reported, and how often?
Obviously, because it's a criminal activity, that most people who are assaulted, if they're doing sex work, are not going to report it. That's not the point. What I'm
So
saying
how
here
do we
is
measure?
we have seen
How
a
do we measure the
decrease.
existence of
Madam,
We have
OnlyFans?
seen a
Let Madam
decrease.
finish.
There's always going to be rapes that go unreported, whether there's online porn or there's not online porn. There's always going to be rapes that go unreported, regardless of every circumstance we can possibly think of. What I'm saying is that of the rapes that are reported, there is a significant decrease since online porn has been introduced to the general public. And that's proven in this study. So if you have a study that proves otherwise, please let me know.
I think the problem with
op-ed
that,
by
Genevieve,
Psychology
is that it's
Today.
like you're just like correlating time, and like in general,
Well,
like I know
she
that
doesn't
Would it
have to
not be
prove,
reasonable
she doesn't
to
have to prove
assume-
that OnlyFans and online sex work reduces it, but it does prove that it hasn't increased it.
Right,
That's
at the
all it
very
does
least,
prove. It
not
doesn't
made
prove
it
it's
worse.
It's
Google
impossible to
this.
prove that.
I did
Well,
Google
if
this, and I
the number
found
of rapes has
disagreeing
not
studies. So
exponentially
I
gone
found
up,
one study that says that pornography
can't
does
it
not
be
cause
worse?
violent sex crimes. I saw another study that says they are correlated. And so like I think that this is probably something that it seems to be debated. There doesn't seem to be like a very clear answer. But I think that like you might, even if they're correlated, like the picture is very fuzzy, because I think it's possible that like, well, I know that this is true. There's like a kind of personality archetype. There's a person who is very low in being able to restrain themselves. They're very low in self-control, or, you know, they can't really control their desires. And that is probably also very linked to like violent crime and risky behavior in general, as well as pornography use. So I think that like the problem in the literature is disentangling those things, and being able to tell that like if violent people also tend to engage with pornography more because they just don't control their urges, or if pornography kind of the question that is unsolved. That's what I'm getting from this like very quick
Yeah, no, I
overview.
get it. And I didn't mean to suggest that this shows an obvious, like, watertight correlation, but I think that Kelly did a really good job trying to surmise what I'm saying, which is, in general, the consumption of online porn has not caused there to be an increase in sexual assault reporting. In fact, we've seen the opposite.
also
We've
not a
seen that there has
decrease,
been a
no.
reduction over the past 20 years.
That's like not true at all. And
Okay, so I found a
it's just not
meta-analysis.
true.
I'll
Well, go
post
ahead
it
and
for all of
believe
you.
Oh, thank you,
or not
Erudite.
believe in your
All right.
own world.
So we looked at a meta-analysis. It's got 22 studies from 7 different countries analyzed. Consumption was associated, so consumption of porn was associated with sexual aggression in the United States and internationally among males and females, and in cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. Associations were stronger for verbal and physical sexual aggression, although both were significant. The pattern of results suggested that violent content of porn may be an exacerbating factor for physical aggression. I will post it. Obviously, everyone can tear it apart as much as they like. It's not my study, so I don't care.
What do we
Thank you,
all
Erudite.
disagree on? Yeah, thank you. But what is it that we all disagree on? Because I feel like I feel like what I'm saying is like correct and obviously based in fact, but you
Clearly
guys are
you
like
do.
having a hard time coming to terms with like I don't know if like you don't want to acknowledge the greater societal issue, which is that like this
you keep saying
contributes to
facts
female
without
oppression.
supplying any statistics is a bit problematic.
My direct
Well, no, so
report
Erudite
to you
posted it,
is
but a lot
that
of this
your
is also like
claim, my direct report to your claim that this is inherently going to disempower women and has been in general as a whole a negative for women. I completely oppose that by all of the reasons that I've listed, which you're probably not listening to. So I'll go ahead and surmise for you once again.
listen.
It creates an opportunity for people to have control over of when they are approached and how they are approached, and they can set boundaries and limits for the people who are wanting to interact with them in a sexual way, rather than having it just happen willy-nilly on the street, in the grocery store, in your office, etc., etc.
Okay, so let's try to focus on this like societal issue, which is that like let's just take, for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that it is true that consumption of violent pornography, so like degrading pornography, verbal degradations and whatnot, may exacerbate, violent tendencies and sexually violent tendencies in men. So let's just like, for this
I
conversation,
think that they've
let's
done
assume that
brain
that's true.
scans on this. I think, to be fair, there is truth in that, but then if women are making
Yeah, so
porn, there's less of that, and that's a good thing, right?
Right.
Less
If
of
women are
what?
able to then choose, like, well, I don't
Wait,
want to make
what?
degradation porn. I want to make porn that, I feel sexy in or whatever. And that's the
I'll
content
let
that's
Tef
available.
finish
I-
writing.
okay,
You're like,
okay, but
okay,
here's
so
the
you're
problem.
compromising with
Oh my
men
God.
now to feel safe. You are literally being like, okay,
Oh
so
my
I still
God.
have to sell my body, but I have to do it to teach them how to not rape me? I mean, it's insane that you guys are not
Here's what,
seeing.
yeah.
April,
Well,
yeah,
here's
April,
the
go ahead.
point is that like you might have the option to engage in degrading porn to capture like a market and make a lot more money for yourself, but as a result, you increase the chance of men engaging in sexually violent behaviors, right? So like that's the problem that we're getting at. And I think that like since Kelly was willing to just like accept this sort of like baseline reality, I think that we should in general like accept it and then ask the question like, where do we go from there? And I think that like the answer to that question, and this is hopefully another place that maybe we can find common agreement on, is that maybe we should limit the way that pornography is made. So like maybe we should have certain restrictions on the production of violent pornography. If it is true that violent and degrading pornography may exacerbate the tendency of men to engage in violent sex, maybe those should be limited. Okay. Is that something that we could like, bite the bullet on?
Yeah, I don't
So
have
I'm
a
willing to
problem.
bite that bullet.
I don't have a problem with that. And I think to Kelly's point, if we see more women being in the creative director position and in the content creator position, that we have a very solid chance that we can change the type of content that is available, even if on the small scale. I'm not saying it's going to completely go away, but I'm saying that that we can choose to produce other types of content, which we generally didn't have as much
Okay,
control over in like a traditional pornography agency sense.
so
think
what
we
if
already
instead of sex work, you like make like movies? Like, why does it like? What I'm saying is that the sex work The access to your body for money is the problem here.
Do not think people
Content
get naked in
creation-
movies, Lav. They do it all the fucking time.
So I think
What do you mean?
so,
It's the
Lavender.
worst comparison to make.
So
Yeah,
Lavender.
but so do men, and they're not denigrated in porn at the same fucking rate. What are you not understanding?
Lavender. So
I
are
guess
you
you
trying
weren't
to
aware
say?
of what's happening, man.
Are you trying to say that I believe what you're trying to say is that sex work when it doesn't matter what the forms, right? So like even if you're talking about in the terms of video content, that yes, the actual content involved may be less or more problematic, right? We've seen extremely problematic porn. We've all seen that, right? And we can see things that are softer and maybe like have more loving individuals or whatever, right? But you're saying that the very fact that a woman is giving access to her body, right, even through video, the fact that she's giving access to her body is inherently detrimental, is inherently derogatory. Is that what you're trying to say?
How is that different to being
Yes, and you know what I actually can compare it to, and I think this is unique experience, and it's not, if you're not buying into my whole feminist thing, we can directly correlate it to the way that Black men are portrayed in porn. They're literally portrayed as like animals taking advantage of like very tiny women. Do you think that this perpetuates like a bigger societal misunderstanding about Black men and hypermasculinity? Do you think this has any reason to be like why white women especially are like, oh, I need like a BBC, I need like a man to ruin me, or why there's so many like men who will ask you like, okay, like, or even ask Steven online all the time, like, you know, what if a big Black guy wants to fuck Melina? Like, it's somehow different than anyone else. Like, do you think that this also
Nobody is
exists?
saying there isn't fucked up porn out there, but it's not statistically the most popular either.
Yeah, so I think this is maybe like the point of disagreement, because I think that if Lav asked, is it possible for pornography to like perpetuate bad things? Everyone would say yes.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
question is about like
yeah.
the degree and like the, you know, whether or not this is inherent to like pornography
So-
in general
yeah,
or
so
not.
that-
So like,
So, so that actor, so that Black actor is now participating in his same oppression and degradation, right? So is this a good thing or a bad thing? He makes money, but societally, it is like he is perpetuating a racist stereotype. He is doing a disservice to other Black men.
Again, my bigger point then is
So-
with being able to
Okay.
empower content creators to create their own content, we can challenge these existing preconceived notions and present things in different ways.
I can't do it. I really, okay.
Are you
Yeah,
like 12
yeah.
years old? Like,
She
come
is.
on, get it together.
No, it is so frustrating to like, because to some degree, listen, I know I'm right, and I also know that I can't wake you up. So I'm at the place where I'm like, okay, how much?
Can't wake up.
So true, queen. But no, it's at the place where it's like, okay, how much? Like, if this isn't getting through to anyone or any of you, like, I don't.
Yes,
And
we're
I
all
also
too
feel like
stupid to
I-
understand your point of view. That's clearly
Okay,
ours.
so I'm
Genuinely,
gonna like dial down the
Babe,
passive
you're making
aggression,
a good
which
case
is
for that.
hold on. I'm going to dial down the passive
Oh, you're
aggression,
gonna
which is
have to
coming from
further
everyone.
insults.
I'm not pointing my finger at one person. It's coming from most people. Okay, I just want to dial it down because it immediately erodes
Not
some level
me,
of conversation. That's true. April, you're perfect. But maybe so we have two options now, because right now we're circling the drain a little bit and everyone's getting frustrated. So we can either move on to the next
I'm not
question that I actually think
frustrated,
is important, which is essentially the relationship that the content creator has with their body as a result of becoming a sex worker and how that changed and shifted, which I think is maybe a conversation that I think we might have more common ground on. I'm not sure. Or we can keep circling the drain, I suppose, on this one. It seems like there's kind of two different like clashing worldviews where I don't think you guys are fully actually understanding what Lav is saying, and I don't think Lav is fully understanding what your guys' critiques are either. So we're kind of
I
missing each
understand
other
what
over and
you're
over.
saying. I just think there's a lot of holes in a very flimsy argument.
Sure.
I
Agreed,
actually think
same.
that I think that my argument is like the least flimsy, and I think that even Taftaj agrees with me.
So I
Of
hate to be
course
this
you
person,
do.
but we look at the internet's response to your argument over the past week, and the general population seems to agree that you don't make any sense and you contradict yourself at every opportunity. So like,
That is
sorry to
not-
point that
that is
out.
not
to the next
true.
question.
Yeah,
Okay,
Genevieve,
we're going to move on to the next
please
question.
don't-
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's not necessary. Okay,
That is also not true.
great.
Okay.
We're going to move on to the next question.
Should we do closing statements? Because that could be good. Just like 1 minute each.
On this topic?
Yeah.
Sure, that would be great. We'll start with Taff.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. So I think that like the fundamental disagreement here is about like the proportion and severity of like the degree to which porn necessarily perpetuates harmful societal degradations. So I think that like the reasonable middle ground that like I started out this conversation with is that like porn can have negative effects and that like we need societally and culturally to have ways to moderate that. But I don't think that porn is necessarily causing these things. So I think that like when you point to like the idea of like black men and porn, I think this is a really good example because like there's definitely pornography that black men can engage in that like influences or perpetuates harmful stereotypes. I think the idea that women are just like, you know, presenting themselves sexually, I think there are ways to do that that are responsible and that don't cause men to, in general, view women worse or to engage in violent sex. And what Erudite brought up with that study, that meta-analysis, I think is a really good point to this kind of nuance, because even that is saying that like, well, you can have kinds of porn that may exacerbate these issues. And so I think that we should try to identify which kinds of pornography exacerbate issues, to what degree, and then try to work around that. That would be my goal.
Great. Madam Genevieve, can we toss it to you?
Yeah. I think that obviously we all agree that sex work can be inherently dangerous. We obviously all agree that in real life sex work is going to be more dangerous than online sex work is. Even if we are looking at the current form of content creation compared to pornography, I believe that we are moving in a direction that does provide women more autonomy and more control over how they are viewed, how they engage in sexual situations. And while there are still a tremendous amount of things that we can address and discuss that are negative and need our attention and need work, those things tend to overlap with other elements of society, other elements of being online, other elements of racism and, you know, marginalized communities suffering, et cetera, that's not unique to sex work. However, I do want to maintain again and reiterate the fact that we're moving in a direction that does empower the creators, and that's inherently beneficial.
Awesome. Lav.
Why don't we give Lav a
I
final word?
need a second. I need a second.
Okay.
I'm a little angry.
Okay. Could we maybe move to Kelly and then we'll come back to Lav?
Sure. So, I guess I'm at disagreement with the concept that porn can always be degrading or whatever. I just want to put into perspective, like, so there is some fucked up porn, 100%, and the impact it can have on people, especially if they're young and developing, is problematic, and I don't deny that. But the majority of people that view porn, I mean, the most popular searches are like lesbian and MILF. They're not inherently like damaging porn categories. So the majority of people that watch porn are not inherently fucked up from just having watched porn. I think sometimes it can be easy to look at the absolute worst side of things, but you don't need to. Okay, got something to say during my closing statement?
I'll let you finish.
Very gracious of you.
Yeah. So now I've lost my train of thought. Thanks.
You were talking
Like,
about
there are negative sides to porn and OnlyFans. Obviously, no one's denying that there isn't any positive exploitation there. But from my point of view, the benefits outweigh the negatives, and I see changes in men that I think are in the positive. I see more of an increase in an interest in consent, for example. So I don't know. That is my opinion. Is there's more positive than negative, but that doesn't deny the existence of the negative.
Awesome. Lav, do you want kind of that final statement?
Yeah. So I believe that there are truths in both sides here. I agree with a lot of what Taft was saying, especially living in like a real world scope. Obviously, I have my utopian pipe dream, but I think it's important to look at like what we can do right now. Obviously, both are with their problems, but I feel like there are different gravities to each side of the situation. I think so many people fall into the trap of oversimplifying sex work. It's obviously like vast in its umbrella term. Each form has its advantages and disadvantages, but it goes without saying that you cannot compare the danger of like obviously full service in-person street work and high class whatever. You cannot compare the impoverished homeless women in Uganda, India, Thailand, Mexico with a college graduated late 20-something with maybe a degree in a big city in the safety of her home, having all the tools at her disposal for optimal safety. This all contributes to this cycle that we cannot get out of. We cannot get rid of one thing. We need to get rid of it all. And I think that there is a world in which, taking it back to OnlyFans, I think that there is a world in which OnlyFans should not exist. But we cannot just say OnlyFans shouldn't exist. Before we get rid of things like OnlyFans, we need to put down safeguards. We need to make social institutions so that we can help women get out of these tough situations. We need to decriminalize sex work for the people selling sex. I think that we do need to criminalize the buying of sex work. Obviously, we need to drop down. We need to come down hard on these men who think that they can use our bodies and have access to them and feel entitlement to them. And I think that this is a greater, huge societal issue, which unfortunately feels like half this panel didn't understand. But that's all I'm gonna say. And also, I want to. I also. Things. But you don't understand is that they're not two different things. And I think the last thing I want to
being the same.
They are the same thing. What the last thing I want to say is that I understand, obviously I stayed in this for as long as I did because I had to, and then finally I was privileged enough to be able to leave. And I don't understand, and I understand that not everyone has that privilege. If you're a sex worker and you're watching this, or I obviously, like, my heart is with you. I'm sorry that, that this is the world that we fucking live in. And, it's nothing wrong with you. You're making the best out of a bad situation. You're making the best out of what you can. And this has nothing about you. And this has this is way more commentary on capitalism itself as a whole and men and the residuals of the patriarchy that this country was set up in. So.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm trying to mull over because the reason why I put on this panel is specifically what I said in my prompt. In almost all of the sex work OnlyFans conversations, it's almost exclusively focused on consumers and then just broad society. And there's very, very little conversation about the content creators themselves, which I actually think is probably the most important part of the conversation, at least in my view. And so I really appreciate you guys kind of all coming out and talking about this. But because of that, I also want to make sure that I'm holding space for both disagreements and whatnot, but also facilitating some level productive conversation. And so the next part of the conversation is a really, really important topic to me, which is how sex work and OnlyFans can change the content creator's experience and relationship with their own body. I think that this is something that I basically never hear about, and I really want to, but I also know that there's a lot of frustrated, we're kind of at this frustrated standoff from the previous conversation, which might not facilitate the most fruitful conversation for the next. So I kind of have two options. If everyone really wants to, we can keep going with this, but I would suggest potentially, if you guys are open, I'd love to do another panel. I'd love to get some people of color as well who are sex workers to come in and talk specifically about this second topic, because I think I don't want to keep you guys for too long, and I'm worried that 30 to 40 minutes isn't enough time to dive into this second question, which
I mean, I'm chill. How do you guys feel?
I feel comfortable with this. I was trying to get at this actually earlier, with the conversation about degradation. And I think it's maybe the most interesting route to go down, because I think that engaging in sex work does change your relationship to your own body and to your own nudity. And the example that I gave earlier was that when you post the first nude photo online, that's a very intense experience. It feels very vulnerable, and then by the time you post the 100th, it feels like nothing. It feels very casual. And so I think something special in a way has been lost, and I think that is a genuine downside to sex work. And I think that speaks to, in some way, what people are getting at when they say that sex work is degrading, because it does take that kind of specialness of, intimacy away. And it's why like certain men, they won't want to get with a girl who does OnlyFans because they feel like that like special experience of seeing her nude is something that is less special. And I think that that's like a legitimate downside and a drawback. Earlier, Lav said that that wasn't her argument and that she wasn't interested in going down that road. But maybe now she feels that that's more reasonable. I don't know. I think it would be interesting to revisit that a little.
Yeah, Kelly?
Mostly I understand, and I do agree that a lot of men, their opinions will change once they know either you do OnlyFans or something like this. I think that it's that has already started to shift and should continue to shift more on the basis that things like revenge porn exists. So people without their consent have their nudes spread all over the place. And should we be judging them for this? I mean, the way that we treated, for example, Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian for their sex tapes that got leaked probably nearing to 20 years ago, 15 years ago, was abhorrent at the time. And it's only now that we're like, oh wait, that was actually really fucked up the way that we treated them. And perhaps we shouldn't see nudity and these sort of sex acts as necessarily as inherently more than they are. It doesn't necessarily have to mean intimacy. I can have intimacy with someone without being naked, and I could fuck someone and there could be no intimacy involved at all. And with nudity as well, I think that's true. I mean, we have nude paintings from hundreds and years ago and sculptures from thousands of years ago when nudity was never seen as much of a bigger deal or taboo as it even is now. So I think it's that should change, not that
Yeah.
we should become
Yeah.
more conservative.
I think there's a
There's
lot
this like
of.
point that sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Oh, I'll just be very quickly. There's
No
this
worries,
point
go.
that I only like half remember that C.S. Lewis has about like the distinction between like, showing your body and like how that relates to cultural expectations. So like he says that, there are like tribes and cultures where people just they walk around topless and they're nude, and that doesn't take away anything special from, their ability to engage with intimacy, because that's just like that's culturally expected, and they're still able to define intimacy in a way that is very special and separate from, seeing people topless because that's normal. And I think that like we had a similar thing in our, our own cultures where once it was scandalous to show, the ankle or the knee. And that's no longer true, but we don't necessarily believe that like we've lost all ability to engage with intimacy. So I think that there is like, what Kelly's saying about like sex tapes being leaked. I think that like there's a way that we can culturally navigate this to say that like we don't have to make it worse than it is. Like we don't have to, heap on this extra cultural punishment for people who, show themselves nude that makes it like, even worse. So yeah, sorry, Genevieve.
I agree with that a lot. We have, at least in the United States, a large portion of our population has very conservative evangelical Christian beliefs where there is a repression of, sexuality in general, and the naked body has, sinful connotations, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that if we as a whole continue to assume that being naked always means there's this exchange of deep intimacy, that is kind of a fallacy. It's more of a Venn diagram, and I think Kelly demonstrated that very, very well. You can be some of the most intimate moments of my life, everybody's been fully clothed for. So it's not necessarily a requirement for one or the other, but what we do see by continuing to kind of go down this route is that we're placing this immense value on the purity of women and women's bodies, right? Like the value is there if you're a virgin, if nobody's ever seen you naked before. And I think that's really contrary to any kind of like modern feminist ideal.
Okay. Lav,
Did
do you have
you get a
any
chance to
final
talk,
thoughts or anything?
Lavender? Did you get a chance to respond to that?
No, I think that the biggest problem with sex work obviously is not stigma but violence and what happens to these women. But I think that obviously the stigma, I don't think anyone here is advocating for like the stigma of sex workers. I think that I just want to break it down from the inside out, from the outside in. But yeah, personally, my relationship with my body you know, I did sex work for all of my adult life, pretty much. I lost my virginity at 16, and the next year is when I started selling it. I started selling my body. So I have very little experience in being a sexual being outside of what I am for money for men. And I think a lot of women have this experience, who will have this experience also getting into OnlyFans very young. You know, the 18 thing, and also just like, I think a lot of women in general, even in real life, in person sex work, they're often very young as well. They're often on the younger side because this is a career that you like age out of, obviously.
I
But
personally
yeah,
wouldn't have
it's,
much of an issue with the age being raised a bit, but how they would implement that, I don't know. But that
I
is
mean, there's
something
got to be something.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's
Like I
got to be
think
something.
like an appropriate solution, one of them might be to like raise it to age 21 before you can sign up for some of these websites. I think that would be an appropriate solution. We already accept that this is a good solution for other things that we consider like, you know, addictive, like alcohol or cigarettes. So I think that a lot of the same arguments can be made with pornography as well.
I think that we run
think
into a
it's
challenge where
definitely,
between 18 and 21, we have this kind of conflict of like, at what point are you a real adult? And I think that it
Yeah.
would probably behoove us to have one streamlined answer to that. So I would say if we were going to have a conversation about raising the age for sex work, we should also raise the age for other like financial commitments, such as student loans that 18-year-olds are allowed to take out and will have a tremendous impact on their life in the future, so on and so forth.
I mean, maybe.
um,
I don't think that it's like unreasonable to say that there are different things. They require different levels of maturity to commit to. So like if we ever get to the point where we're decriminalizing like more drugs, like heroin or something, like, you know, hypothetically, heroin is the kind of thing that like you need an enormous amount of responsibility to like, if you're going to engage in it, to the point where like most people we don't think are like capable of that level of responsibility. But something like alcohol, we think that like at 21, you should be reasonable enough. Like your brain is developed enough. And so using age as like a barometer is useful for that.
Yeah, I mean, as an
um,
OnlyFans creator, so like I don't think it would be possible, for example, to make the internet be 21 plus. It would be nice as a creator that uses that platform for it to only be a platform for 21 plus. But that's my opinion on it. But I do also understand that there's going to be a lot of 18-year-olds that are getting kicked out of their house and then they don't feel like they have any other options. And I'd rather them be on OnlyFans than street walking. So there is that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd rather none of that be happening. I'd rather that we have things put in place societally that we all pay our taxes for, to make sure that these things don't happen to women that they don't need to do.
In
Yeah,
an
ideally,
ideal
we don't
utopia,
want
of
like
course,
vulnerable
but
women to feel like stuck in it, right?
I got
Like
given that we
I
do expect
right
people to
into
be
that sex
financially
stuff.
independent and support themselves at 18 and participate as an adult in community, I think that having this as the age of entry into sex work or OnlyFans is also appropriate, unless we want to challenge all of those other elements as well.
I think
So
that
then,
we should
could I maybe
challenge all of them.
pose, since you guys have all like entered into sex work, what was your experience? I know you're all going to have very different experiences of this based on the age specifically that you entered into sex work, but how did it change your experience? Or maybe that's a presumptuous question. Did it not change your relationship to your body at all? Like, what impact did that have? I don't know the level of responsiveness you get on like OnlyFans or Chatterbait, but like do certain comments from different like viewers and stuff, did that like change the way that you engage with your body?
I don't mind going first on this one. So, because I was like a cosplay model for longer before I did Patreon and then OnlyFans, it didn't really make any difference. And I would say that the way that women view women tends to be a harsher reality on us than what men usually like. So, for my consumers, they don't care as much. But my friend, for her, like subscribers, they love it for it to be a bit more real. So they like the stretch marks, they like less filters and things like this. And I have noticed this as a bit of a trend. They're not as keen on too much Photoshop and filters. But I mean, I had pretty bad body dysmorphia when I was a kid. I was bullied quite a lot at school. And I don't think that being on OnlyFans, if anything, it's probably made me a little bit more positive about the way I look and a little bit more open to showing flaws and things like this. But social media as a whole does the opposite. You want to be perfect looking and you want to Photoshop things to an inch within your life. So there is almost like this, there's like these two things. There's what you think your audience probably will like, and then there's what you like and want to put out as well. So that can be a bit difficult.
I think that's really valid. You know, on social media in general, we see all of these filtered, airbrushed faces that don't even really look like faces. Even beautiful people, like beautiful celebrities, are face tuning their photos so that we can't even conceptualize what like foundation should really appear like on skin. And that is harmful. But I think that social media, the internet, you know, media in general is more harmful on body image than sex work. In my experience. Now, again, I know I have a very nuanced position. I am college educated. I worked in the corporate world with tremendous amount of success for over a decade. When I was 30, I quit that world. At 31, I entered into sex work by choice. This is 100% I am so much happier doing this because I have control over how I look, how I present myself, where I didn't have that before. The companies that I worked for before could tell me what color nail polish to have, whether or not I could, you know, style my makeup in a specific way, like different elements of that. So for my body image, I feel that I can be more authentic to myself when I'm not fitting into, I guess, the generally accepted mold. And I think that Kelly also touched on a really important fact that a lot of consumers do appreciate natural bodies and the diversity that comes along with that. And I think traditional porn kind of sells us this idea that everybody always wants to consume porn where the women look like Barbie dolls. And I think
Two
that that's not
sentences.
true. I think that one thing OnlyFans has shown us is that people enjoy all body types and they enjoy seeing them and they enjoy having sex with them. And it's ultimately made me have a more positive relationship with my body and my image.
Lav or April?
I'll go. I used to feel all these things. I don't know how long you guys have been doing sex work. I used to feel all these very positive. I used to feel extremely positive about it. Lately, I've realized that I cannot exist outside of this scope, even for myself. I've conditioned myself to the point where I can't have sex normally. I can't have sex normally. I feel different having sex with my fiance because I have allowed so many people access to my body for pay. I feel like I constantly have to worry about him. I can't worry about my sexual happiness. I don't know how to do things outside of the scope of something like porn, like moaning the right way, the right positions. I have a completely unrealistic expectation of sex. I have a completely unhealthy relationship with sex and my sexuality because of sex work. And and I think that a lot of this also, I think 60% of women who go into sex work have reported mental illness. And I think that this is like basically what's known as like a feedback loop. And I've talked about feedback loops before, but like, you know, traumatized women will traumatize themselves because either subconsciously or consciously we seek it out to either fix it or to just because it's what we're used to. And that is 100% what happened to me. I was sexually abused as a child. I was abused as a child and I let it happen to me again. And I broke the cycle and I'm so happy that I did.
April?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm kind of unique in this. I think that I have like a very unique relationship with sex work and with OnlyFans. And I recognize that. I'm 21 now. I will be 22 soon. And I started posting pictures online when I was like 18. So also like pretty young. But like for me, and I think that like Lav has talked a lot about the experience of trans women. But if I can like give my own experience of like being a trans woman in the trans community and the relationship between that and sex work or sexy pictures, it's very normalized in that community to just like post nudes, just like your friends, right? So like you go to like almost any trans server and it's like almost problematic where like people are just like always like sharing nudes with each other. And it's like there's a lot of sexual freedom within the LGBT community, and there's like a lot of acceptance for that. So all of the people that I'm around sort of like are willing to make like space for that and be very non-judgmental. And so I think that like I don't really experience a lot of like negative pushback for posting nudes in the communities that I interact with. And in general, like it hasn't really had a very bad mental effect on me. I think that there was a point when I was 19 and I was being posted online on 4chan like every day on LGBT, and it was brutal. And the conversations would like you know, the comments would just like pick me apart, and it was hard. And I think that that had a lot more to do with just being public on the internet. That was like very difficult for me. But I overcame that, and I'm at the point now where like I'm not bothered at all by like what people say, or if people are like, posting my docs, or they don't really bother me. And that's why I think that I'm very unique, because I can like detach myself from it in a way and engage with it that like isn't, negatively mentally affecting me. So yeah, that's my experience.
Not meaning to be rude, Lav. Have you seen a doctor or a therapist about your issues with sex?
Yeah,
It's,
of
no,
course.
it's a genuine question. Yeah. Are you,
Yeah, for
are you making
twice
progress?
a week. Yeah, part of the biggest progress I made was taking myself out of it. It was liberating. It was exhilarating to feel like I was my own self again, and that I was for just me, and I could live my life being just me, and that was enough.
Why do you think that you had, so like in relation to sex work, which bits do you think made you feel that way about yourself and sex?
I actually had the most positive experiences with in-person sex work. It felt like the most connection in a way that but I think what a lot of people look for and what they get addicted to during sex work is the validation. People will say that they like miss their fans, like on OnlyFans when they like go on a trip or like they take a month off. They're like, oh, I miss the validation, and that was definitely me. I think I was supplementing the attention of my parents with the attention of men, mixed with the fact that it was like obviously very much like what I needed to do for money. So yeah, I think that it was like, yeah, it was a bunch of different things confounding into just one like very evil thing. And apparently that is like not a unique experience. So.
Yeah, I mean, you said you got into sex work very young, right? So that would have affected you on a developmental level, most likely. So that's obviously not great, and I'm sorry that that happened to you.
I had a very, as far as in-person sex work goes, I had like a very safe journey. I was very lucky in that way. So OnlyFans was the worst of it, I think. Just
So
it became
you were getting validation from OnlyFans, but it affected you negatively.
Yeah, so like validation should not come from like a man or an outside circumstance. A validation should come from within. And I needed to be able to tell myself. Yeah.
Oh, usually
so
it doesn't
like
have such an extreme negative effect. That's just.
I don't think that that's true. I actually think that you're building pathways in your mind to where you become addicted to it. And I think that it will be extreme for everyone. I think that every woman as they age starts to deal with this like, oh my God, I'm not it anymore. I'm not fertile anymore. I'm not attractive anymore. And this is
the
why
most popular, so we're good for a while.
Mommy dommies all the way.
but the MILF porn is 25-year-old women. And that's the thing, is that you're not understanding
the ones
that
they like the most. But I mean, sure.
No,
I mean,
there are way more that are
I'm gonna
young.
disagree with everything you're saying. But usually, so like external validation for me, it's sort of nothing. Like I don't get a lot from it. Like I get dopamine from weird things. So I like cosplaying, and it's simply like a way to fund the things that I like to do in a way that is very flexible. So this is usually why I like to do it. It's combining things I like in a way that I like to do things. So I don't think that everyone that does OnlyFans is going to be crippled by the validation or lack
I
of
think
it.
so either. I don't think
Mm,
so either, and I think that sex work should still like, sex work is going to always exist, but I do not think we should call it empowering. I think that it should exist. Um, I think there are women who I just think the percentage of women doing it who probably can do it is less than 10%. Who can do it without taking, like, a big hit to their mental health and their well-being.
like the percentage of women that do sex work is pretty small in relation to the population, right? So,
Right. Like it's clearly not for everyone.
and the percentage of the population that has mental illness is still moderately high. So, is it really that much higher in sex work than it is in the general population? I mean, I looked some
It's
statistics.
much
I
higher.
can't really see it as being provably higher. But I mean, even if it was a bit higher, I guess it depends on the mental illness and
I think we
why.
also see
We know
people
the
who have mental illness or disabilities drawn to things like sex work because it does allow more freedom that more traditional jobs wouldn't. So it is more accommodating in general.
Yeah, there's like a lot of
Sure, but
disabled
also
viewers as well.
feedback loop. Sure, but also we feedback loop. I don't think any therapist is going to say, "Yeah, you should do sex work," ever. This is not a healthy job by
So
any
my
means.
therapist would say that and has said that it is meeting the financial needs that I have. It provides a good
Yep.
work-life balance between my professional life and my personal life. It allows for me to address other issues in my personal life that require my time that my 50-hour-a-week corporate job did not allow me to. I get to travel. All of these things that are beneficial to my life. Now, that's not going to be for everybody, but to say that no therapist would ever say this is a positive thing is invalid because there are sex workers who see therapists who have very healthy lifestyles and very good mental health.
The vast majority is not that way. So the vast majority of sex workers are being sold by pimps. So
Again, we're talking about consensual sex work, specifically OnlyFans.
okay, but one cannot happen. You seem to think that
what I say is that as a consensual sex worker, it's possible to have a good mental health and a healthy lifestyle. And then you go back to what about trafficking victims? Like, yeah, okay, trafficking victims are obviously a different situation, but that's not what I'm talking about here.
So,
so
Genevieve,
you
it's
are
possible, but the problem is that like online content creation in general is very hard to deal with mentally. And like
In any capacity, whether
people,
it's
everyone
sex
thinks
work
they
or
can do
not.
it. And then the first like negative comment they get like destroys them. So
Yeah.
like in general, it's very hard. But sex work is extra hard for a few reasons. One is that the type of people who engage with it tend to be very vulnerable. Number two is that like the type of work itself is very vulnerable. You're exposing something about. Do we lose her?
Oh, I lost
No.
you. Sorry.
Oh no.
April,
Yeah,
Taff.
it's all of us.
Oh.
Hopefully Taff will be back soon.
Yourself that is very intimate.
Hey
So-
Taff,
Yes.
rewind back. You had a lag spike, and we didn't hear like most of what you just said. But could you try to
Okay, where did I leave off? I think the problem with sex work is that
sex
the
work
people
is
who
hard.
engage,
Sex work is hard.
it's like
Online
very
sex work.
vulnerable people.
Yeah.
Very vulnerable people engage with it. And it's especially vulnerable work. And online work is already difficult. So
I want to apply that.
I mean, I do agree. I think that online work, that streaming, that content creation, that all of these jobs that have been created by the internet do come with a lot of complex, possible negative consequences. It's very difficult to get feedback from tens of thousands of people on what you're doing. And yeah, it could be more difficult to get that when it's on your naked body. But in my experience, as mentioned before, I think that by providing a platform where sexual dialogue can be encouraged and exchanged in a consensual way limits the negative interactions. It gives them an appropriate venue instead.
Yeah,
But
so
do you
I
think-
will say, I don't know if it's not so much, are you vulnerable? Do you have a mental illness? But also your personality type. as to whether you can manage this, and it shouldn't just be managing. Do you enjoy? Like, for example, if I get negative comments, I think it's very funny because I'm a very combative person. I like arguing with people. I don't really take the opinions of random anonymous people very seriously. I've been a troll since I was a kid, so these things don't affect me. So this as an industry is fine. But if you're a very sensitive person, it's probably not a good industry for you, and probably neither is most of entertainment either. So
Yeah, so I wanted to jump off of that. You kind of took this in the direction I wanted to go. Um, so our friend Lavender before related, black men to how women are treated. And talking about entertainment in general and how it being damaging, like within sports or in other celebrity type situations, black men are put in a certain category, right? And then certain things are said about them and like what they're good for, right? And even in sports where you could see black men dominating, like in like the NFL or something, right? They wouldn't. They at some point they had kept the quarterbacks like pretty much completely white because yeah, you can run a ball, right? We can see you're fast. We can't deny your strength. We can't deny all that stuff. But like, are you leadership material? And so relating this back to OnlyFans, when we're uh, uh, saying that, well, we can create a space where women, where these comments about your body are like appropriate. That it's a venue that makes this more easily manageable. Um, is that actually a possibility, right? Like, is it that like we're simply saying only a certain type of person who can deal with this should ever apply, right? Like the only certain type of person can be an athlete who can deal with the comments about their body, the racialization of themselves, right? Can that be the only person that can have access to this space? Same thing with OnlyFans, right? Like, well, this is an inherently toxic space, and you're going to have all these negative things, but like, it's inherent, and so like there's no way to screen for that. So essentially, we're sending people there, who will have these terrible experiences, and saying, well, I guess you didn't have the personality type for it.
yeah, I do
Yeah,
feel
how
like
do you
it would be good to like give more warning to people. It's like, these are all the negative aspects. Do you think that you can deal with them? And then like to give them some kind of, I guess, almost practice run. That would be pretty useful to be able to see if you can like manage this level of negativity. I'll be honest, in the actual OnlyFans, I haven't had as much negativity, but I have from outside of OnlyFans and the way that people have interacted with like my content, for example. I think if you don't have a very either like, because you can have a strong personality but still be dealing with mental illness and things like this. So they're not necessarily correlated, but it depends how you specifically deal with those things and how you deal with conflict and how you manage negativity in general, maybe stress and other things like this too.
Are we
to think just like the constant sexualization of your body and how blasé it becomes like really starts to fuck up your psyche. Like the way that I was like with my boyfriend at Disneyland posting like my nudes for the day, and then I'm like, then a bunch of men are jacking off to me, I'm like continuing my day. Like it became so fucking blasé. That is so unhealthy. That is so unhealthy for the human brain, for the female brain, for the male brain. That is just unhealthy, at which the access that we have to it and how blasé it's become. And yeah, that's like another thing where it's like, I know that we're not trying to like moralize our sexual bodies, right? Because there's no like inherent bad thing about being a sexual being, but to be a sexual being with that much,
I
to
think
not
that's more
have
indicative of a very poor work-life balance, though.
Right, not being able to
Yeah, you shouldn't be posting news of your
compartmentalize,
boyfriend at
like,
Disneyland.
if you know you're having a day at Disneyland, then maybe post them before you go or take the day off or something. Like, I feel like you could, again, this isn't an attack on you. I do believe that it takes a certain type of personality because you are running your own business and you're marketing yourself as the product. So, like, that's very different than a lot of other elements of business, and you need to be able
Sure,
to.
it's definitely about the time in which I fucking post, and not that I'm whatever.
It could be about building healthy habits. It could be about
need
building healthy
boundaries.
habits and boundaries. That's the big point.
Yeah, I
and
don't
sometimes
think that
time and
it's
scheduling plays a part in that.
okay. Great. Okay. Yeah, it obliterated my relationship with myself and my sense of self and my body, and it made it completely. I thought
It's
that
okay to agree with us without knowing that there's other things.
I don't agree with you. I don't agree with you. And
You
I
don't
also
think you
think
should have
that
work-life separation and boundaries between.
no,
your
I
work.
just think that you missed the fucking point. And also
No. Nobody's saying that your issues are just because of that, but that is a negative thing.
No, but I'm
happening
actually
in your life.
this part of the conversation because it means nothing to me. No, but what I was going to say
No need
was
to
that
be rude, love.
Let Lavender get her point out.
you've been rude to me for a while.
You've been sighing and making weird noises everywhere I was talking. Bro,
It's because some of the things you say are brain dead.
I don't sigh when you're talking, do I?
It's rude here. You're the one who calls me stupid, her brain dead,
Already
things
the
are
whole
retarded, this,
personal
that, and the
insult.
other. Like, you're the only one
I guess
using
I'm just
names
combative.
to
I
insult
guess I'm just
people.
combative.
And then
You
you
guys wanna
cry
be
about it
online?
when
You
somebody
guys wanna be
questions you in
online?
a legitimate
pull
way.
back. Let's
You
pull
guys
back.
you guys just don't have the type of personality that could deal with like all this.
You've been doing this for a
vitriol.
week.
Well, okay,
You've been on Twitch
so
for a
let's pull
week.
back. Let's pull back. Okay?
Maybe it would be like a personality
so
test to make
Lavender-
sure that
Lavender-
you
I'm going to mute people if you don't
engage
pull back.
with me.
Listen to Prime, please.
Yes, please. Lavender, please try to get your point out. I know, Lavender, I know this can be very frustrating. I've been in exactly your position, being surrounded in a panel and feel like you're not being heard. So I definitely feel for you. I get it. But yeah, I'd still want to hear whatever point you're making.
Train of thought was because I lost it, but yeah. The casualty in which we're also sharing our bodies, I think says something about society and how impersonal sex is becoming. And I don't think that sex becoming impersonal is negative because of like slut shaming, but I think it's bad because we're not connecting with each other as human beings. And I think that in my spiritual practice, at least, obviously you guys don't have to subscribe to this, but like I think that life is about being human, connecting with other humans, and I think that something so vulnerable like that should be with people who like really care about you because it does something to you, and the body keeps score. So that's it.
Sure. I think that's probably a good place to end off. So I want to give space, of course, to all of you. Outro. Get a last word in. Then after that, we can also make sure you can shout yourself out. Yeah. So can we start with our friend, Madam Jen?
Yeah, definitely. Again, thank you for having me on the panel. I think that there was a lot of interesting dialogue. There's obviously so much more that could be unpacked and talked about, and there's so many different directions and branches that this could go. But it's nice to have the conversation and to start kind of addressing some of these issues. If I could give anyone a big takeaway, obviously sex work is not for everyone, but for people who are looking to engage in the adult industry, I think that the options we have available to us now are a million times better than options that have been available in the past. I think that we have more resources and knowledge available to help stay safe and create boundaries for ourselves. We have other women in the community who have made themselves available to assist with some of the more challenging parts of getting going. And in general, online sex work seems to be a net positive for members of the sex work community. Y'all can follow me on my. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Are we doing like our shout out stuff?
We can do it now. Yeah, we do it now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, cool. Y'all can follow me on Twitch. It's Madam Genevieve, and then Twitter is where I post most of my schedule updates, et cetera, and that's Madam_Genevieve. As mentioned, it's kind of tricky to spell, so it's going to be in the chat.
Lavender, please.
I'm Lavlune, LAVLUNE, and then EE, and then EEE on different platforms accordingly. just with different ease. This was great. I would love, more panels like this where we have obviously like way more voices. Most of us are white, most of us were affluent. I think that there should be spaces with like way more, diversity. But overall, this was a cool, good conversation. Please follow me if you want to hear more about feminism. And that's it.
Thanks so much. All right, next, Kelly.
Yeah, I'm just Kelly Jean. If you want to see big titty cosplay pics, I guess you can Google that if you really want to. Otherwise, I just orbit around occasionally, pop in and annoy people and disappear. That's my job.
Search big titty cosplay. Okay, all right, thank you. You cornered the market there. So let's go to friend Not So Erudite, who did a fantastic job putting this all together. Shout out to Not So Erudite.
Yeah, I wanted to thank all of you. I know Taff's internet just crapped out last minute, so I want to make sure that I send an extra thank you to Taff as well, who's not here to shout her out. I believe it is Taff Taj, TAFTAG, which will be in the chat, obviously.
T-A-J,
yeah, J. Yeah, I really appreciate it, guys. I was a little slower. I hit my head very hard like 2 days ago, so I appreciate you guys being willing still to come on. Yeah, just coming on at all. I understand the tension. I'm not going to there's nothing worse than at the end of a panel where everyone just pretends that there was never any tension or missed feelings. And then we're all like, and anyways, ooh.
I enjoy this. I know it's weird, but I love this. It's great. And I get dopamine from it. But I don't know how Lav feels. She genuinely feels like, I don't know. She looks miserable.
And Fifis are okay. Even if you feel some way, that's totally okay. I just want to basically make space to acknowledge that and everything in between and say I thank you guys for coming on, because I think why the feelings matter so much in these conversations is because these conversations matter. Sex workers very rarely get to talk about their experience from their end, and that matters. And feelings are going to come up because these things are inherently personal. The reason why I asked each of you is because you all have an experience with sex work. I've watched many of you talk about it, and you guys think about your experiences in sex work as well. And so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and kind of being willing to kind of wrestle and grapple with these conversations, because they matter.
It was really fun.
Yeah,
right?
I
It was
thoroughly
fun.
enjoyed the dialogue. So thank you again for putting it together and giving the space to challenge the stereotypical perception of a sex worker.
Yeah, I'll probably try to put on another one in the future with maybe a bit of a swap of cast of just to make sure that we have some people of color. I'd love to get some mass presenting some mass presenting workers in here as well, just to kind of hear their experience with it, because I imagine that's really different. But yeah,
I can recommend you some people if you want.
I would love that. It was hard finding. Unfortunately, the people I could find was this crew, but I would love to find
someone a few as well. So, my name is PrimeCayes, PrimeCayes. Come find me, have conversations like this all the time, here. We stream 6 days a week, either here on YouTube. Come check us out. Follow on Twitch, and like and subscribe on YouTube, whatever. You know what I mean. Yeah, this is great. I wanted to say quickly that I really do appreciate everyone who showed up here in all your different perspectives. I'm familiar with Genevieve. Genevieve's been on the channel a bunch lately. I'm very happy to have her. Kelly, this is our first time meeting, but I thought you were a lot of fun. And
I was on my best behavior.
Okay, so
it only gets worse from this.
When this is purely my thing, I want you on your worst behavior. That's what I enjoy.
I'd rather ease into that. I need to test people's levels of how much they can tolerate. I don't want anyone rage quitting.
Well,
people get it very easily.
You have not
strategy.
You have not experienced delivery.
Good businesswoman.
Right? Which is something I do on Mondays, right? Yeah, toxicity. We're cool with that. And last but not least, Lav. I want to say to you that yeah, I've been there. I've been on a panel with literally 15 other people on screen, and none of them are on my side. None of them seem to be understanding the points that I'm trying to make, that I'm trying to express something, and it feels like it's not getting across. And especially when you're passionate about a subject, it's extremely, extremely frustrating. So I get that, and I thank you for sticking through that. That was great. And yeah, I'd love to have a conversation with you and with all the others later on. So if you're interested in that, I'll reach out
Sure.
and hopefully we can make that happen. But
I
guys,
just
this
want to
was
say I do understand Lav's point of view. I just simply don't agree. I don't think you have to.
You can't not agree with it's reality.
Okay, laugh. Stop. Come on.
I just think you look
Kelly go.
unhinged.
yeah.
You realize
So
this?
I didn't mean to imply that you
Well,
guys
then
aren't.
I guess I'll bite that bullet. The unhinged feminist that is shaking the women to wake up. I'll bite that
I
bullet.
really think your opinion's the only right one.
I didn't mean to
It's not
imply that.
Usually, just in this situation.
I didn't mean to imply
just
that you
not
guys are
opinion.
incapable of
I'm saying
understanding her or anything. I'm just saying that like sometimes when you're in a panel, you're trying to get across your points. It's just very difficult. So I was trying my best to help facilitate that. Maybe I could have done better or whatever. But it's a frustrating position when everyone seems to be against you. That's all I'm acknowledging.
I was gonna say your opinion and your right to it is valid, but I don't know anymore now.
It's like not an opinion. It's like the world that we live in. So I don't know how to explain it to you.
Okay,
It
and
seems
I'm
opinion
gonna
is based on
shamelessly
how you
shill. Thank
experience
you,
the
Papa
world.
Guts, so much for the raid. That was amazing. I super
Okay.
appreciate it. All of these subs coming in all of a sudden, I appreciate it, guys. Very generous and kind of all of you. You know, if you guys enjoy this content, if you guys would like more, there's a simple way you can support me. You can support Kelly, Lav, Madam Genevieve, and Prime. If you guys like your content creators, and don't forget your Primes. They're free. You can just toss them out and they don't renew. So make sure, even if you watch on YouTube, to give it to your favorite one of these 5 wonderful people, content creators, okay? Shameless shill.
Don't give it to me. It's not worth it.
With that, I'm going to say adieu so I can rest my brain. As always, big hugs, big kisses. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Prime.